Dawn broke over the city like a judgment. Caleb Warren stood frozen inside his dying garage, watching through grimy windows as 11 luxury cars rolled up like a funeral procession. Except he wasn't dead yet. Mercedes, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, each one worth more than he'd earn in a lifetime. They lined the curb in perfect formation, engines purring with quiet menace. Caleb's hands trembled. 24 hours ago, he'd done the unthinkable. He'd told a billionaire that his money couldn't fix everything. Now, apparently, the bill had come due. But before we see how this ends, let me tell you how a broke single father gambling on one impossible promise ended up here. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next changed everything. The morning Caleb Warren's life changed forever started the same way every morning had for the past 3 years, with the taste of fear. He woke at 5:47 a.m. to his son's coughing from the bedroom next door. Not the alarm. Never the alarm. Just Ethan, 7 years old, his lungs still fighting the respiratory infection that had lingered for 2 weeks because Caleb couldn't afford to take him back to the doctor. The first visit had cost him the money he'd saved for the electric bill. The second visit would cost him the rent. So he listened to his son cough in the darkness and made the same calculation he made every morning. How much longer could he wait before it became something worse? Caleb pushed himself out of bed. Not a bed, really. Just a mattress on the floor of the studio apartment above his garage. The springs had given out months ago. He'd meant to fix it. He fixed everything else. Cars, motorcycles, lawnmowers, wheelchairs, bicycles, anything mechanical that people brought to Warren's auto repair with hope in their eyes and not much money in their pockets. He was good at fixing broken things, just not his own life. "Dad?" Ethan's voice came through the thin wall. "I'm here, buddy." Caleb grabbed his jeans from the floor, pulled them on. "How are you feeling?" "Okay." That was Ethan's answer to everything. The kid had learned early not to complain. When your mom leaves before your 5th birthday and your dad is drowning, you learn to say you're okay even when you're not. Caleb knew that feeling. He walked into Ethan's room, barely bigger than a closet, but Ethan had never complained about that either. His son was sitting up in bed, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, his face pale in the early light coming through the window. On the wall above his bed, Ethan had taped up drawings. Cars, mostly. Race cars, monster trucks, sleek sports cars that Caleb would never be able to afford to even sit in, let alone own. "You sound better," Caleb lied, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I feel better," Ethan lied back. They were both getting good at it. "I need you to do me a favor today," Caleb said, ruffling his son's hair. "Mrs. Chen is going to watch you again. I've got a big job coming in." "Another big job?" Ethan's eyes lit up the way they always did when Caleb mentioned work. In Ethan's world, a big job meant money, and money meant maybe they'd be okay for a while. "Yeah, maybe," Caleb tried to smile. "We'll see." The truth was, there were no big jobs. There were barely any jobs at all. The garage had been slowly dying for 2 years, ever since the dealership opened up on Morrison Street with their shiny service center and their certified technicians and their ability to actually advertise. Caleb had none of that. What he had was skill, integrity, and a reputation for being the guy who'd fix your car even if you couldn't pay him until next month. Which was exactly why he was 3 months behind on rent, and the landlord had started leaving messages that Caleb didn't have the courage to return. He got Ethan dressed and fed, cereal with milk that was a day past expiration but still smelled okay, and walked him downstairs to Mrs. Chen's apartment. She was 73, lived on Social Security, and watched Ethan for free because she said she liked the company. Caleb suspected it was because she could see he was barely holding on, and Mrs. Chen had raised 4 kids on her own back in Taiwan. She recognized the look. "He's still coughing," she said quietly at the door so Ethan wouldn't hear. "I know. I'm working on it." "Caleb, I know, Mrs. Chen. I'll figure it out." She looked at him with the kind of sad, knowing expression that made him feel like a failure. "You're a good father. You know that?" He wasn't sure he did. Good fathers could afford doctors. Good fathers didn't raise their kids in studio apartments above failing garages. Good fathers had their lives together. "Thank you for watching him," Caleb said. because he didn't know what else to say. By 7:30 a.m., he was in the garage, staring at the empty service bay and trying to figure out how he was going to make it through another week. The morning sun cut through the dusty windows in long, golden shafts that illuminated exactly how rundown everything had become. The walls needed paint, the equipment needed maintenance. The sign out front, Warren's Auto Repair, honest work, fair prices, was missing the R in repair. He'd become a cliché, the struggling mechanic with the broken sign. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Is this Warren's Auto Repair? Need someone who works with specialized mobility equipment, referred by Dr. Stein at County Medical. Can you handle a custom wheelchair? Today. We'll pay premium for priority service." Caleb read it twice. Wheelchairs weren't his specialty, but he'd worked on a few over the years, mostly just adjustments, repairs, basic mechanical fixes. The medical equipment companies charged a fortune for simple work, so people came to him instead. He always said yes. How could he not? "Yes. Can handle it. When?" The response came immediately. 10 a.m. Address is 2247 Riverside. Gate code 4792. Please be discreet and professional. Riverside. That was the neighborhood where every house was worth more than Caleb would earn in his entire life, where the driveways were longer than his street, where people had gates with codes. He typed back, "I'll be there." And just like that, he had a job. Maybe enough to buy Ethan's medicine. Maybe enough to make the landlord wait another week. Maybe enough to feel like less of a failure for one single day. At 9:52 a.m., Caleb pulled up to 2247 Riverside Drive in his 15-year-old pickup truck that burned oil and made a sound like it was dying every time he accelerated. The house, if you could call it a house, sat behind iron gates at the end of a tree-lined driveway. It was the kind of place that didn't look real. White stone, massive columns, windows that stretched 2 stories high, a fountain in the circular drive, perfectly manicured hedges shaped into geometric patterns that probably cost more to maintain than Caleb's yearly income. He punched in the gate code. The gate swung open silently, like they'd been waiting for him. As he drove up the long driveway, Caleb felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle in his chest. This was the world he'd never be part of, the world where people didn't worry about electricity bills or expired milk or whether they could afford to take their sick kid to the doctor. He parked his truck near the fountain, feeling like it contaminated the view, and grabbed his toolbox from the back. Before he could even reach the front door, it opened. A man stood in the doorway, tall, late 40s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. He wore casual clothes, slacks and a button-down shirt, but even Caleb could tell they were expensive. Everything about him said money and power. "Mr. Warren?" The man's voice was crisp, controlled. "Yes, sir. Caleb Warren. You called about a wheelchair?" "I texted. I'm Victor Hale." He said it like Caleb should recognize the name. Caleb didn't. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hale." Something flickered across Victor's face. Surprise, maybe, that Caleb didn't know who he was. "Come in. I'll show you the equipment." The inside of the house was even more intimidating than the outside. Marble floors, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. A staircase that curved up to a second floor with wrought iron railings. Everything was white and gold and pristine, and Caleb was suddenly very aware of the grease stains on his work shirt and the fact that his boots were old and scuffed. Victor led him through the house without comment, down a long hallway lined with photographs. Caleb caught glimpses as they walked. Victor shaking hands with people in suits, Victor at podiums, Victor cutting ribbons. And in several photos, a young girl with dark hair and bright eyes. They entered a sunlit room at the back of the house, a kind of combination bedroom and living space, customized with wide doorways, low counters, and accessibility features Caleb recognized immediately. This was a room designed for someone with mobility challenges. And there, by the window, sat the girl from the photographs. She was older now, maybe 15 or 16, with her father's dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and sharp, intelligent eyes that turned toward them as they entered. She was in a wheelchair, but not like any wheelchair Caleb had seen before. It was sleek, modern, with a gunmetal gray frame and what looked like custom ergonomic supports, High-tech, expensive, probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Maya, Victor said, his voice softening slightly. This is Mr. Warren. He's going to look at your chair. Hi, Maya said. Her voice was quiet but steady. She had the kind of composure that seemed too old for her age. Hi, Maya. Caleb set down his toolbox and crouched so he was at her eye level. Your dad says the chair's giving you some trouble? She glanced at her father, then back at Caleb. It's just uncomfortable sometimes. They've adjusted it a few times, but it still doesn't feel right. They? Caleb asked. Victor stepped in. The engineering team that designed it, top specialist. It's a custom build, designed specifically for Maya's needs based on assessments from 3 different orthopedic specialists and a biomechanical engineer. It cost... He stopped himself. It's state-of-the-art. Caleb heard what Victor wasn't saying. It cost a fortune, so it should be perfect. Mind if I take a look? Caleb asked Maya. She nodded. He spent the next 20 minutes examining the wheelchair with the same methodical attention he gave every piece of equipment. He checked the frame, the wheels, the brake system, the footrests, the armrests, the seat cushion, the back support. He asked Maya to move forward, backward, turn left, turn right. He watched how her body positioned itself in the chair where her weight distributed, where tension appeared in her shoulders and neck. And the more he looked, the more wrong it seemed. Mr. Hale, Caleb said finally, standing up. Can I be direct with you? I'd prefer it. Victor crossed his arms. Caleb chose his words carefully. This is an incredible piece of equipment. The engineering is remarkable. I can see why it cost what it did. He paused. But I think there's a fundamental problem with the design. Victor's expression hardened. The design was created by specialists. I understand that, sir, and I'm sure they're very good at what they do, but... Caleb glanced at Maya, then back at Victor. Can we talk privately? Anything you have to say, you can say in front of my daughter. Maya spoke up quietly. Dad, it's okay. No, Maya, this concerns you. Victor's jaw was set. Go ahead, Mr. Warren. Tell me what these world-class specialists got wrong. There was an edge in his voice now. A challenge. Caleb recognized it. The defensiveness of a man who'd spent a fortune trying to help his daughter and didn't want to hear that it might not have been enough. But Caleb had a son. He knew what it was like to do everything you could and still wonder if it was enough. And he knew what it was like to see your child in pain and feel helpless. So he took a breath and told the truth. The back support is angled wrong, Caleb said. It's pushing her forward instead of supporting her posture. And the seat cushion, it's too firm. I know that probably seems counterintuitive, but for prolonged sitting, especially for someone with Maya's specific needs, firm isn't always better. It's creating pressure points. He pointed to the armrests. These are too high. She's having to hunch her shoulders to rest her arms comfortably, which is causing neck and upper back tension. And the footrests, they're positioned based on standard ergonomic calculations, but Maya's flexibility is different. They're forcing her legs into an unnatural position. Victor stared at him. That's quite a diagnosis from a mechanic. I'm just telling you what I see, sir. And what you see contradicts 3 orthopedic specialists and a biomechanical engineer who spent months on this design. Yes, sir. I believe it does. The room went silent. Victor's expression was unreadable. Caleb waited, his heart pounding. He'd just contradicted a man who probably wasn't used to being contradicted. A man who could certainly afford to pay him and just as certainly could afford to crush him. Then Maya spoke. He's right. Both men turned to her. Maya, Victor started. Dad, he's right. Maya's voice was stronger now. The back support does push me forward. My shoulders do hurt from the armrests. The footrests do feel wrong. I've been trying to tell everyone, but they keep saying I need to adjust to it, that my body needs time to adapt to the proper positioning. Her eyes met Caleb's. But it's not me that needs to adapt. It's the chair that's wrong. Victor looked like he'd been struck. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. You told me to give it time, that the specialist knew best. There was no accusation in Maya's voice, just weariness. Everyone keeps telling me to give it time. The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Caleb felt like he'd walked into the middle of something bigger than a wheelchair adjustment, a father's guilt, a daughter's patience, and the terrible gap between them. Finally, Victor spoke. "Can you fix it?" "I can try," Caleb said, "but it'll take more than a simple adjustment. I'd need to rebuild some of the support systems, change the cushioning, reposition the footrests, maybe reinforce the frame depending on how the weight distribution changes. He stopped. "It's what?" "It's basically a rebuild, Mr. Hale. I'd need time. And I'd need to work with Maya, test things as I go, make sure everything fits her specifically, not what the calculations say should fit her." "How long?" Caleb thought about his empty garage, his sick son, the landlord's unreturned calls, the desperation that had been his constant companion for 3 years. He thought about saying something reasonable, a week, 2 weeks. Give himself time to do it right, time to not fail. But then he looked at Maya, really looked at her, and saw the expression he'd seen on Ethan's face 100 times, the quiet acceptance of discomfort, the learned helplessness of a kid who'd stopped expecting things to get better. And something in him broke. 24 hours, Caleb heard himself say. Victor raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious." "That's impossible," Caleb corrected, "but I'll do it anyway." "And if you can't?" "Then you'll have lost a day, and I'll have lost my credibility, but I don't think I'll fail." Caleb looked at Maya again. "I think I can help." Victor studied him for a long moment. Caleb could practically see him doing the calculation, weighing the risk of trusting a random mechanic against years of expert opinions and expensive failures. "Why?" Victor asked finally. "Why would you make such a promise?" Caleb could have said a lot of things. He could have mentioned the money he desperately needed, the opportunity to prove himself, the challenge of solving a problem that specialists couldn't solve. But the truth was simpler. "Because I have a son," Caleb said. "He's 7. And if he was hurting, and everyone kept telling him to just adapt, to give it time, to trust the experts, I'd want someone to actually listen to him, to believe him, to try." Something shifted in Victor's expression. Just for a moment, the hard shell cracked, and Caleb saw the father underneath the billionaire. 24 hours, Victor said. "But you work here. I have a workshop in the East Wing, fully equipped. Whatever you need, I'll provide. And Maya stays involved in the process. Every decision, every change, you consult with her." "Agreed." "And Mr. Warren?" Victor's voice hardened again. "If you're wasting our time, if this is some kind of it's not. If you damage the equipment, I won't. If you fail, Mr. Hale." Caleb met his eyes. "I'm a single father, barely keeping my business alive. I drive a truck that's held together with prayer and duct tape. I live in a studio apartment above my garage with my son, and I can't afford to take him to the doctor even though he's been sick for 2 weeks. I have nothing. No reputation worth protecting, no wealth to fall back on, no safety net. All I have is my skill and my word. So when I promise you I'll help your daughter, I mean it, because I can't afford to mean anything else." The words hung in the air between them. Caleb hadn't meant to say all that, hadn't meant to expose himself like that. But it was out now, and there was no taking it back. Victor stared at him. Then slowly, he nodded. The workshop is this way." The workshop was bigger than Caleb's entire garage. Professional-grade equipment, tools he'd only seen in catalogs, a lift system, diagnostic computers, everything organized and pristine. It was the kind of space Caleb had dreamed about when he first opened his own shop, back when he still thought dreams came true if you worked hard enough. Victor had the wheelchair brought in. Up close, under the bright workshop lights, Caleb could see just how sophisticated it was. Carbon fiber frame, precision engineering, custom-fitted components. Someone had spent months designing this. Someone had cared. They just cared about the wrong things. "I'll need to take measurements," Caleb said to Maya, who transferred to a standard wheelchair so he could work. "And I'll need you to be honest with me. When something hurts, when something feels wrong, you tell me immediately. No being polite, no giving it time. Deal?" Maya smiled. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Deal." For the next 3 hours, Caleb worked with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He disassembled the back support system, studying how it had been constructed. Brilliant engineering, terrible application. The specialists had optimized for perfect posture according to their models, but humans weren't models. Maya wasn't a set of measurements and calculations. She was a real person with a real body that didn't fit perfectly into their theoretical framework. He took new measurements. He consulted with Maya. He sketched designs, modified them based on her feedback, sketched again. He worked with materials from Victor's well-stocked workshop, testing different cushioning densities, different support angles, different configurations. Victor watched for the first hour, then disappeared. Staff members came and went, bringing food that Caleb barely touched, offering assistance that he politely declined. Maya stayed, rolling over in her temporary chair every time Caleb needed to test something, offering feedback with the kind of detailed awareness that came from living in a body that didn't work the way others expected it to. "You're really good at this," she said around hour 4 as Caleb was fabricating a new support bracket. "I fix things," Caleb said, not looking up from his work. "It's what I do." "No, I mean," she paused, searching for words. "The other specialists, they always made me feel like I was the problem. Like, if their design didn't work, it was because I wasn't adapting correctly. You make me feel like the design is the problem." Caleb set down his tools and looked at her. "Maya, you're not the problem. You're never the problem. Anyone who made you feel that way was wrong. They were trying to help." "I'm sure they were. But sometimes people get so focused on their idea of what should work that they stop listening to what actually does work." He picked up the bracket again, examining it. "Your body knows what it needs better than any model or calculation. My job isn't to force you to fit the chair, it's to make the chair fit you." "Is that what you do with cars too?" "Pretty much. Cars tell you what's wrong if you know how to listen. People do too." "My dad doesn't listen very well," Maya said quietly. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He'd seen the tension between them, the guilt in Victor's eyes, the resignation in Maya's, the distance that grows between people who care about each other but don't know how to bridge the gap. "He's trying," Caleb offered. "I know, that's what makes it harder." Maya sighed. "He throws money at problems, hires the best specialists, buys the best equipment, builds me the best room. But he doesn't just sit with me, talk to me, ask me what I actually need instead of assuming he knows." Caleb thought about Ethan, about all the times he'd been so focused on surviving, on making money, paying bills, keeping them afloat, that he'd missed the moments his son needed something money couldn't buy. Just presence, just attention. "Being a parent is hard," Caleb said. "We mess it up a lot. But the fact that he hired me, that he's giving me a chance to help you, that means he's listening now. Maybe not perfectly, but he's trying." "You're a good dad, aren't you?" Maya asked. "I'm a broke dad who can't afford his son's medicine. I'm not sure that qualifies as good." "Money doesn't make you a good parent. Being there does. Caring does." She wheeled closer. "Your son is lucky." Caleb's throat tightened. "Thank you." They worked in comfortable silence after that. Caleb fabricated new supports, modified the seat cushion, repositioned the footrests based on Maya's actual flexibility rather than theoretical calculations. He reinforced the frame in key stress points, redistributed the weight balance, adjusted the brake system to accommodate the new configuration. Hour 6 became hour 8, became hour 10. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Ethan is fine. Ate dinner, doing homework. Don't worry." He texted back, "Thank you. Working late. I'll pick him up in the morning." Another text. "Caleb, he needs medicine." "I know." "Soon? Tomorrow. I promise." He set the phone down and got back to work. By midnight, the workshop looked like a tornado had hit it. Parts scattered everywhere, tools on every surface, sketches and calculations covering the workbench. Caleb's hands were covered in grease and small cuts he didn't remember getting. His back ached. His eyes burned. But the wheelchair was taking shape. The door opened. Victor stood there, still dressed despite the late hour. "You should take a break," he said. "Can't. Clock's ticking." "It's midnight. You've been at this for 14 hours. "I've got 10 more." Caleb didn't look up from the brake mechanism he was installing. Victor walked into the workshop, studying the transformed wheelchair. You really think you can finish by morning? I don't think, I know. That's quite confident for a man who's rebuilding a piece of equipment in one night that took a team of engineers months to design. They had months to think about it. I have hours. That focuses the mind. Victor picked up one of Caleb's sketches, a detailed diagram of the new back support system with annotations in Caleb's cramped handwriting. You know, when Dr. Stein referred me to you, I thought it was a joke. A mechanic? For a custom medical wheelchair? And now? Now I'm watching a mechanic do in one night what specialists couldn't do in 6 months. Victor set down the sketch. Why is that? Caleb straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. He was tired enough to be honest. Because they were solving an engineering problem. I'm solving a people problem. They were trying to build the perfect wheelchair. I'm trying to help Maya. He met Victor's eyes. That's the difference. You barely know my daughter. I don't need to know her whole life story to see she's in pain. I don't need her medical history to know the chair isn't working. I just need to listen to what she's telling me. With her words, with her body, with how she moves and sits and breathes. Caleb turned back to the wheelchair. Sometimes the best solutions come from paying attention, not from having all the credentials. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Why did you really take this job? Caleb almost laughed. You're paying me. I need the money. That's not what I asked. Caleb stopped working. He thought about lying, about giving some noble answer about wanting to help people or being passionate about his work, but he was too tired for performance. I need the money for my son's medicine, he said simply. Ethan's been sick for 2 weeks. I can't afford to take him back to the doctor. The first visit wiped out my savings. I'm 3 months behind on rent. My business is failing. I wake up every morning afraid that this will be the day I can't provide for my kid anymore. He looked at the wheelchair. So yeah, I took this job for the money, but I'm doing this work for Maya because she deserves better than a chair that hurts her, the same way Ethan deserves better than a father who can't afford his medicine. You're very honest. I'm too tired to be anything else. Victor pulled out his phone, typed something, then put it away. I just sent you the payment we agreed on, plus a bonus. The pharmacy on Mitchell Street is open 24 hours. Take an hour. Go get your son's medicine. Come back and finish the work. Caleb stared at him. Mr. Hale, it's Victor. And I'm not being charitable. I'm being practical. You're no good to my daughter if you're worried about your son. Go. Take care of Ethan. Then come back and take care of Maya. Caleb's phone buzzed. He looked at the notification. The amount Victor had sent was double what they'd agreed on. Enough for medicine, enough for rent, enough to breathe for a month. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just go. Bose. The pharmacy was empty at 12:47 a.m. except for a tired clerk and fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Caleb bought Ethan's medicine, the real prescription this time, not the over-the-counter stuff he'd been trying to make work, plus a few extras. Vitamins. Better bandages. Things he'd been putting off. At the register, as he counted out bills from the payment Victor had sent, he felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Actual physical relief. He drove back to the house on Riverside Drive through gates that opened for him now, up the long driveway that didn't seem quite as intimidating anymore. The workshop lights were still on. When he walked in, he found Maya there. She'd fallen asleep in her temporary wheelchair, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, a book open in her lap. Caleb grabbed a blanket from a nearby chair and carefully draped it over her shoulders. She stirred, but didn't wake. She wanted to wait up for you, Victor's voice said from the doorway. I told her to go to bed. She refused. She didn't have to do that. She believes in you. Victor walked into the workshop. That's rare. Maya stopped believing in solutions a long time ago. Too many specialists, too many promises, too many failures. He looked at his daughter sleeping. But she believes in you. No pressure, Caleb said quietly. Exactly the right amount of pressure. Victor turned to him. Did you get the medicine? Yeah, I'll give it to Ethan in the morning, thank you. Don't thank me. Finish the work. That's all the thanks I need. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. Go ahead. Why'd you really hire me? Dr. Stein gave you my name, sure, but you could have hired anyone. Medical equipment specialists, engineers, people with actual credentials. Why a mechanic from a failing garage? Victor was quiet for a moment, studying the partially rebuilt wheelchair. Dr. Stein told me something when she referred me to you. She said, Victor, you've tried every specialist in the city. You've spent a fortune. But you haven't tried someone who actually cares more about Maya than about being right. She said you'd fixed her mother's wheelchair last year, charged her $30 for 4 hours of work because that's all she could afford. And when her mother sat in that chair and cried because it didn't hurt anymore, Dr. Stein said you cried too. Caleb remembered. Mrs. Stein, 83 years old. The wheelchair her insurance provided had been giving her back spasms. He'd spent an afternoon rebuilding it while she told him stories about immigrating from Russia in the 60s. When she'd sat in the finished chair and realized the pain was gone, she'd wept. And yes, Caleb had cried too, because he'd been thinking about his own mother, gone now, and how she'd never asked for help even when she needed it. I didn't realize Dr. Stein had a daughter, Caleb said. She doesn't talk about me much. We're complicated. Victor smiled sadly. But she told me if you want someone who'll see Maya as a person instead of a problem, call Caleb Warren. So I did. I'm just a mechanic. You're a father who understands what it means to care more about the outcome than the credit. Victor headed toward the door, then paused. Finish the chair, Caleb. Prove that credentials aren't everything. Prove that sometimes the best person for the job is the one who actually gives a damn. At 3:17 a.m., Caleb installed the last component, a modified brake lever positioned exactly where Maya's hand naturally fell. He tested it, smooth, responsive, perfect. He rolled the wheelchair back 6 feet and looked at it properly for the first time since he'd started. It didn't look like the sleek, sophisticated machine that had arrived. It looked modified, rebuilt. Some parts were clearly new, others adapted from the original. It wasn't elegant, but it would work. He knew it would work. Maya stirred in her chair, her eyes opened slowly. Is it done? It's done. She sat up, the blanket falling from her shoulders. Can I try it? In a few hours. Let's wait for proper light. I want to watch how you move in it, make sure everything's right. Okay. She looked at the wheelchair, then at him. Thank you. Don't thank me until you've tried it. I'm not thanking you for the chair. I'm thanking you for listening. Caleb's exhaustion hit him all at once. 22 hours of work. The weight of the promise he'd made. The fear that he'd still fail. All of it crashed over him and he had to sit down on the workbench before his legs gave out. You should rest, Maya said. I'm okay. You're not. You're exhausted. There's a couch in the next room. I need to stay here. In case something's wrong. In case I need to adjust. Caleb. She wheeled closer. It's okay to rest. The chair will still be here in a few hours. But that wasn't what he was afraid of. He was afraid that if he stopped moving, if he let himself relax for even a moment, he'd realize what he'd done. He'd promised the impossible. He'd gambled everything on one night, one build, one chance. And if it didn't work, if Maya sat in that chair and it hurt her, if all his modifications failed, if the specialists had been right all along, then he'd have wasted everyone's time, wasted Victor's money, wasted Maya's hope. And hope was the cruelest thing to waste. What if it doesn't work? The words came out before he could stop them. Maya didn't answer right away. She sat there in the dim workshop, surrounded by scattered tools and parts, and looked at him with eyes that were far too understanding for someone her age. Then we try again, she said simply. I don't have time to try again. I promised 24 hours. You promised to help me. The timeline was just a number. She smiled. Besides, even if the chair doesn't work perfectly, you've already done something no one else did. What's that? You treated me like I knew my own body. You listened when I said something hurt instead of telling me I was wrong. You asked what I needed instead of assuming you knew better. She gestured at the rebuilt wheelchair. That matters more than whether every adjustment is perfect. Caleb felt something in his chest loosen. Some knot of fear he'd been carrying. You're pretty wise for 16, he said. I'm 17. And I've had a lot of practice being patient with people who mean well but don't understand. Your dad loves you. You know that, right? I know. That's why it's hard. Maya looked toward the door where Victor had stood hours earlier. He loves me so much that he can't accept that some things can't be fixed with money or experts or perfect solutions. He wants to give me a normal life, but I don't want a normal life. I just want a life that doesn't hurt. That's what we're trying to give you. I know, and that's why I'm not worried about whether the chair is perfect. You're trying to give me comfort, not trying to prove you're right. That's the difference. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the night was starting to fade. In a few hours, the sun would rise. In a few hours, they'd know if Caleb's impossible promise had been worth making. But right now, in this moment, sitting in a workshop with a girl who'd learned to lower her expectations and a wheelchair that might change everything, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Not just the mechanical satisfaction of fixing something, not just the relief of earning money, but actual purpose. The sense that what he was doing mattered in a way that went beyond the immediate problem. He'd spent 3 years drowning, 3 years feeling like a failure, 3 years wondering if he'd ever be more than just a struggling single father, barely keeping his head above water. But tonight, he'd been someone who made a difference. Whether the chair worked or not, he'd been the person who listened when everyone else had stopped listening. He'd been the person who tried when trying seemed impossible. He'd been the person who saw a girl in pain and decided that was unacceptable. That had to count for something. At 5:43 a.m., Victor found them both asleep in the workshop. Caleb slumped over the workbench. Maya in her temporary wheelchair with her head resting against the armrest. He didn't wake them. He just stood there for a moment, looking at the rebuilt wheelchair, at the man who'd worked through the night, at his daughter who finally looked peaceful. Then he quietly left to make coffee for when they woke up. Because in a few hours, the sun would rise, and they'd find out if a broke mechanic had just changed everything, or if some promises were simply too impossible to keep. The smell of coffee woke Caleb at 6:47 a.m. His neck screamed in protest as he lifted his head from the workbench, and for a disorienting moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw the wheelchair, his wheelchair now, rebuilt and waiting, and everything came rushing back. 24 hours. He'd promised 24 hours. He had less than 3 left. You're awake. Victor stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept either, dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. Maya's freshening up. She'll be back in 10 minutes. Caleb accepted the coffee gratefully. It was good, rich and strong, the kind that probably cost more per pound than Caleb spent on groceries in a week. He took a long drink, feeling the caffeine hit his system like a restart button. Did you stay up all night? Caleb asked. Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about. Victor gestured vaguely at the wheelchair. Everything. Second thoughts about hiring the random mechanic? Second thoughts about the past 6 months, the specialists, the appointments, the promises that this time would be different. Victor sat down on a stool, cradling his own coffee. Do you know what it's like to watch your child suffer and not be able to fix it? To have all the money in the world and realize it's worthless? Caleb almost laughed. Mr. Hale, Victor, I have no money in the world, and I watch my son suffer every single day, so yeah, I know exactly what that's like. Right, of course. Victor looked embarrassed. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, and you're right. Money doesn't fix everything, but it fixes a lot more than nothing does. Caleb set down his coffee and stood up, his joints protesting. Your daughter has specialists and custom equipment and a beautiful home. My son has a studio apartment and a father who works 60 hours a week and still can't afford his medicine. We're both doing our best. It just looks different. But you're here. You show up for your son. You show up for your daughter too. You just show up with resources I'll never have. Caleb walked over to the wheelchair, running his hand along the modified frame. The trick is using those resources to actually help instead of just making ourselves feel better. And that's what we're trying to do today. Victor stood up and joined him at the wheelchair. Together, they looked at what Caleb had created in one impossible night. A machine that was part engineering, part intuition, part desperate hope. What if it doesn't work? Victor asked quietly. Then we figure out why and try again. You said 24 hours. I lied. Caleb met his eyes. I'll take however long it takes. The deadline was just to get started, to prove I was serious. But helping Maya, that doesn't have a deadline, that's just the work. Something shifted in Victor's expression. The hard, defensive shell cracked a little more. You know, Victor said, when Maya's mother left, when she decided she couldn't handle raising a disabled child, I made a promise to myself. I promised I would give Maya everything. The best care, the best equipment, the best life. I promised she would never want for anything. That's a good promise. It's a terrible promise, because everything became a shield. I threw money at every problem, hired every expert, bought every solution. I thought that's what being a good father meant, providing everything. Victor's voice cracked slightly. But I never asked Maya what she actually needed. I never sat with her and just listened. I was so busy trying to be the perfect provider that I forgot to be present. Caleb thought about Ethan. About all the times he'd worked late, missed bedtime, been too exhausted to do anything but collapse. He told himself it was necessary. He was providing. He was surviving. He was doing what fathers do. But how many moments had he missed? How many times had Ethan needed him to just be there instead of being productive? We're all just trying not to fail, Caleb said. Sometimes we mess it up. Sometimes we get so focused on the big gestures that we miss the small moments. But we keep trying. That's all we can do. Is it enough? I don't know. Ask me when our kids are adults and they're either in therapy or they're not. Victor laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. Fair enough. The door opened. Maya wheeled in, her face freshly washed, her hair pulled back in a neat braid. She looked at the rebuilt wheelchair sitting in the center of the workshop, and her expression was unreadable. Ready? Caleb asked. She took a breath. Ready. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Caleb's life. He helped Maya transfer from her temporary wheelchair to the rebuilt one, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. Victor stood back, giving them space, his arms crossed tightly like he was trying to hold himself together. Maya settled into the seat. Caleb watched her face for any sign of discomfort, any indication that he'd failed. Her eyes widened. She shifted slightly, testing the new support. It's different. Good different or bad different? Caleb asked, his heart pounding. I don't know yet. Give me a second. She leaned back against the modified support system, moved her arms to the repositioned armrests, placed her feet on the adjusted footrests, sat there, breathing, feeling. The silence was excruciating. Then Maya's shoulders dropped, not in defeat, in release. The tension Caleb had seen in her upper body since the moment he'd met her simply melted away. Her posture shifted, her spine finding an alignment that looked natural instead of forced. Her hands rested on the armrests without her shoulders hunching. She looked comfortable. Oh, Maya said softly. Then again, stronger. Oh. Talk to me, Caleb said. What are you feeling? I'm not feeling anything. That's the point. There's no pressure on my back. My shoulders don't hurt. My legs feel right. She gripped the wheels and pushed forward experimentally. The chair moved smoothly, responsively. It's like wearing shoes that actually fit instead of shoes that are supposed to fit. She rolled forward, then back, then turned in a circle. Her movements were fluid, controlled, natural, not the careful compensating movements Caleb had seen yesterday when she'd been trying to work around the chair's flaws. These were the movements of someone working with their equipment instead of against it. The back support, Maya said, running her hand along the modified frame. It's not pushing me forward anymore. It's just supporting me. And the cushion, it's softer, Caleb said, but with strategic firmness in the weight-bearing points. The specialists were right that you needed support. They just distributed it wrong. It doesn't hurt. Maya's voice was thick with emotion. Dad, it doesn't hurt. Victor moved forward as if pulled by a string. He knelt beside the wheelchair, looking up at his daughter with an expression that broke Caleb's heart. Pure relief mixed with guilt, mixed with love, mixed with the terrible realization of how long she'd been suffering. Baby, Victor said, his voice cracking. How long? How long has it been hurting? Dad? How long, Maya? She looked away. Since the beginning. Since the first fitting, I told them it felt wrong, but they said I needed to adjust. So I tried to adjust. 6 months. Victor's face went pale. You've been in pain for 6 months, and I told you to give it time. You were trying to help. I was trying to fix you, like you were a problem to be solved instead of my daughter. Victor put his hand over hers. I'm so sorry. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have listened. He looked at Caleb, his eyes wet. A complete stranger figured it out in 1 day, and I couldn't see it in 6 months. Caleb felt like an intruder in this moment. He stepped back, giving them space, but Maya called out to him, Caleb, don't go. You did this. You need to see this. See what? Maya pushed herself forward across the workshop floor, her movements growing more confident with each rotation of the wheels. She navigated around the workbench, past the scattered tools, executed a tight turn that would have been impossible in the old configuration. Then she stopped in front of the mirror mounted on the far wall. Caleb watched her look at herself. Really look at herself. In the old chair, she'd always seemed smaller somehow, hunched, fighting against the equipment. Now she sat tall, comfortable, present in her own body in a way that was visibly different. I look like me, Maya said wonderingly. Not like someone trying to fit into a machine, just like me. Victor stood behind her, his reflection in the mirror showing a man coming apart. You've always been you, sweetheart. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to be anything else. Dad, you gave me everything. Everything except what you actually needed, which was a father who listened instead of a father who hired people to listen for him. Caleb cleared his throat. I hate to interrupt, but I need Maya to test a few more things. Make sure everything's holding up under movement. They spent the next hour putting the wheelchair through its paces. Caleb had Maya navigate different surfaces, smooth floor, carpet, the slight ramp leading out to the garden. He watched how the chair handled, how Maya's body responded, looking for any signs of stress or discomfort. He made minor adjustments, tightening a bolt here, tweaking an angle there, fine-tuning the modifications based on real-world performance. Victor followed them through the house, quiet now, observing. Several staff members appeared at various points, drawn by the unusual activity. Caleb caught their expressions: surprise, curiosity, and in the older woman who appeared to be the housekeeper, something that looked like relief. Ms. Maya, the woman said, her accent marking her as Eastern European, you look good. Better? I feel better, Anya. So much better. Anya shot Caleb a look of pure gratitude, then disappeared back into the house. By 8:30 a.m., Caleb was satisfied. The chair was working. Not perfectly. He could already see a few areas where he'd want to make improvements given more time, but it was working. Maya was comfortable. The modifications were holding up. The impossible promise had been kept. I think we're good, Caleb said finally. They were back in the workshop. Maya sat in her chair, her new chair, her actual chair, with a smile that hadn't left her face for the past hour. Victor stood beside Caleb, and when their eyes met, Caleb saw something he hadn't expected. Respect. You did it, Victor said simply. We did it. Maya told me what was wrong. You gave me the resources to fix it. Don't diminish what you did. Victor's voice was firm. You saw what no one else saw. You listened when no one else listened. You promised the impossible and delivered it. He paused. How much do I owe you? Caleb thought about the payment Victor had already sent. Enough for medicine, rent, a month of breathing room. He thought about what was fair, what was right, what this work was worth. You already paid me, Caleb said. That was the advance. This is for the completed work. Name your price. I don't... Caleb stopped. He could ask for anything. Victor would pay it. He could ask for enough to save his business, to get ahead instead of just surviving. He could ask for the kind of money that would change everything. But when he looked at Maya, comfortable in her chair, he remembered why he'd really taken this job. Not for the money, for the chance to help, for the chance to be the person he'd needed when he was drowning and no one was there to pull him up. The advance was more than fair, Caleb said. Keep the rest, or donate it, or... An idea struck him. There are other people like Maya. People whose equipment doesn't work right, who can't afford the specialists, who've been told to just adapt. Maybe use the money to help them. Victor stared at him. You're turning down money. You, who admitted you can't afford your son's medicine, are turning down money. I can afford his medicine now, because of you. That's enough. It's not enough, not even close. Victor pulled out his phone. What's your garage's address? Why? Just tell me. Caleb gave him the address. Victor typed something into his phone, sent it, put the phone away. Done. What did you just do? Solved a problem, which is what people with money are supposed to do when they actually pay attention. Victor's expression was unreadable. You'll find out tomorrow. Victor, you kept your promise. Let me keep mine. He held out his hand. Thank you, Caleb. For my daughter. For showing me what I was missing. For being the person who cared more about the outcome than the recognition. Caleb shook his hand. Victor's grip was firm, the handshake of a man sealing a deal he considered important. Can I ask you something? Maya said from her chair. Both men turned to her. Will you teach me? She asked Caleb. Teach you what? How to maintain the chair, how to make adjustments, how to understand the mechanics. Her eyes were bright with interest. The specialists never explained how anything worked. They just told me what to do. But you explained everything. You made me part of the process. I want to learn more. Caleb looked at Victor, who nodded immediately. I'd like that, Caleb said. I'd like that a lot. They exchanged numbers, made plans for Maya to visit the garage the following week. Caleb gathered his tools, packed up his equipment, and prepared to leave. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the workshop windows, illuminating the space where he'd spent one impossible night changing someone's life. As he walked out to his truck, Victor followed him. You know, Victor said, I've met a lot of people in my life. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, geniuses, people who society says matter. He paused at the truck's door. But I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like you. I'm just a mechanic. You're a father who saw another father's failure and fixed it. You're a man who had every reason to take advantage of my desperation and instead helped my daughter. You're someone who kept a promise no one else would have made. Victor handed Caleb an envelope. Inside is my personal number. Not my office, not my assistant, my number. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Understood? Caleb took the envelope, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say you'll call if you need help. Say you'll let someone help you the way you helped Maya. Victor's expression was serious. Pride is fine until it hurts the people who depend on you. Your son needs you healthy, needs you stable. Promise me you won't be too proud to ask for help. I promise. Good. Victor stepped back. Now go home to your son. Give him his medicine. Be the father you are instead of the father you're afraid you're not. Caleb drove away from the mansion on Riverside Drive as the morning traffic was building. In his rearview mirror, he could see Victor standing in the driveway, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared. But Caleb didn't feel like he was leaving anything behind. He felt like he was carrying something forward, something important. The drive home took 20 minutes. When he pulled up to his garage with the missing R in the sign, when he climbed the stairs to the studio apartment where his son was waiting, when he opened the door and saw Ethan sitting at the small table with Mrs. Chen working on a coloring book, he felt like he was seeing it all differently. This was his life. Not perfect, not wealthy, not the life he'd imagined when he was younger and full of dreams. But it was real, it was his. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. Dad! Ethan jumped up from the table, running over. Mrs. Chen said you worked all night. Did you fix the chair? I fixed the chair. Caleb knelt down and pulled his son into a hug, holding him tight. And I got your medicine. We're going to get you feeling better, okay? Okay. Ethan pulled back, studying his father's face with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could manage. Are you okay, Dad? You look tired. I am tired, but I'm good. Really good. Mrs. Chen gathered her things quietly. At the door, she paused. The landlord called again. I told him you'd call back today. The real world came rushing back. One good night, one successful job. It didn't erase 3 months of unpaid rent, It didn't fix the dying business or the uncertain future, but it did give him breathing room, time to figure things out. "I'll call him," Caleb said. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." After she left, Caleb gave Ethan his medicine, made them both breakfast, actual breakfast, eggs and toast instead of just cereal, and sat with his son at their small table. Ethan chattered about his time with Mrs. Chen, about a drawing he'd made, about a show he'd watched. Normal, ordinary, beautiful moments of being a father to a son who just needed him to be present. Around noon, exhaustion finally caught up with Caleb. He lay down on the mattress on the floor, intending to rest for just an hour, but his body had other plans. He slept through the afternoon, through the evening, through the night. 14 hours of sleep, his body recovering from the impossible marathon he'd put it through. When he woke, it was morning again. A new day. Ethan was still asleep in the next room. The sun was coming through the window, and Caleb's phone had 17 missed calls. His heart jumped. Had something happened? Was it the landlord? Mrs. Chen? Had something gone wrong with Maya's chair? He checked the voicemails. The first was from an unknown number. "Mr. Warren, this is Patricia Gomez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to talk to you about the work you did for Victor Hale's daughter. Please call us back at..." He deleted it and moved to the next one. "Caleb Warren, this is Marcus from the Tribune. We're running a story about..." Delete. "Mr. Warren, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Mercy Hospital. Victor Hale gave me your information. We have several patients who need..." He paused, listened to the whole message. Dr. Chen explained that she had patients with mobility equipment that wasn't working properly, patients who couldn't afford the specialists, patients who needed someone who actually listened. She wanted to know if Caleb would be interested in consulting. The next voicemail was similar. A physical therapist from a rehabilitation center, then a call from a disability advocacy organization, then another doctor, then a parent whose son's wheelchair was causing pain. One by one, Caleb listened to them all. 17 calls, 17 people who needed help, 17 opportunities to do what he'd done for Maya. The last voicemail was from Victor. "Caleb, I hope you're getting some rest. I wanted to give you a heads up. I may have mentioned what you did for Maya to a few people. Doctors I know, therapists, advocacy groups. I hope that's okay. I just thought there are a lot of people out there like Maya. A lot of people suffering because their equipment doesn't work right, and no one's listening. You're good at listening. You're good at helping. So I gave them your number. If that's too much, if I overstepped, I apologize. But I thought you should know that what you did for my daughter, it wasn't just fixing a chair, it was showing people that there's a better way." A pause. "Also, check your garage. I sent something over. Consider it a thank you, or an investment, or just check your garage. Call me when you can." Caleb's hands were shaking as he set down the phone. 17 calls, 17 people. This wasn't just one job anymore. This was something bigger. He looked around his small apartment, at his son sleeping in the next room, at his life that had felt so small and so failing for so long. And he realized something had shifted, not because of money, not because of one successful night, but because someone had seen what he could do and decided to amplify it instead of hoarding it. Victor Hale, billionaire, had done something that money alone couldn't do. He'd given Caleb a platform, a chance, recognition. Caleb got dressed quietly, careful not to wake Ethan, and went downstairs to the garage. The sun was just coming up, painting everything in soft gold light. He unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stopped dead. The garage wasn't empty. Where there had been old, failing equipment, there was now new machinery. A professional lift system, diagnostic computers, tool chests filled with specialized equipment. Everything organized, everything pristine, everything top of the line. In the center of it all sat a new sign propped against the workbench. Warren's Auto and Mobility Repair. The words were professionally printed, the sign ready to install. The R was very much present. On top of the sign was an envelope with Caleb's name on it. Inside was a note in handwriting he recognized as Victor's. "Caleb, you gave my daughter her comfort back. Let me give you the tools to help others find theirs. This isn't charity. It's an investment in someone who actually gives a damn. The equipment is yours. The choice of what to do with it is yours. But I hope you'll choose to keep doing what you do best, listening to people and fixing what's broken. Not just the equipment, the trust, the hope, the belief that someone actually cares. The world needs more mechanics like you. My daughter needed you. These 17 people who called need you. Your son needs you to be more than just surviving. So here are the tools. The rest is up to you. Victor, P.S. The sign company will install it tomorrow if you want, or you can keep the old one. Your call. Caleb stood in his transformed garage, holding the note, surrounded by equipment that represented possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine. He thought about the 17 voicemails, about Maya, comfortable in her chair, about Ethan, upstairs, finally able to get the medicine he needed, about the choice in front of him. He could say no, could return the equipment, could stay small and safe and just barely surviving because that was familiar and known, or he could say yes, could take the leap, could become the person who helped people the way he'd helped Maya, not because it was profitable, but because it mattered, could build something bigger than just survival. The choice felt enormous, but when Caleb really examined it, he realized it wasn't a choice at all. He'd already made it. The moment he'd looked at Maya and promised the impossible, the moment he'd worked through the night, the moment he'd decided that comfort mattered more than credentials, he was already the mechanic who listened, who cared, who helped. Now he just had the tools to do it properly. Caleb pulled out his phone and called the first number back. Dr. Sarah Chen from Mercy Hospital. She answered on the second ring. Dr. Chen, this is Caleb Warren returning your call. You mentioned you have patients who need help with their mobility equipment? Her relief was audible. Yes, Mr. Warren. We have several patients whose insurance-provided equipment isn't working well, and they can't afford the modifications they need. I heard what you did for Maya Hale, and I wondered, I can help, Caleb said. When can I start? They made arrangements. Then he called the next number and the next. One by one, he returned all 17 calls, listening to each person's story, understanding their needs, making appointments, promising help. By the time Ethan woke up, Caleb had scheduled consultations for the next 2 weeks. His empty calendar was suddenly full. His dying business was suddenly alive. His life of barely surviving was suddenly full of purpose. Dad? Ethan appeared in the doorway to the garage, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What's all this stuff? This, Caleb said, pulling his son into a hug, is what happens when you help people. Sometimes they help you back. Is our business going to be okay? Caleb looked around the transformed garage, at the new equipment, at the sign that now included mobility repair, at the future that had suddenly opened up in front of them. Yeah, buddy, I think our business is going to be more than okay. Because of the chair you fixed? Because of the girl I listened to. Caleb lifted Ethan up onto the workbench. You want to know what I learned? What? That sometimes the most important thing you can do isn't the fanciest or the most expensive. Sometimes the most important thing is just paying attention, just caring, just showing up and trying. Even when you're scared, you'll fail. Ethan thought about this seriously. Is that what you did? That's exactly what I did. Then I want to do that too. Caleb smiled. Then I'll teach you. Deal? Deal? They spent the morning together in the garage. Caleb showed Ethan the new equipment, explained what each piece did, let him help organize the tools. They worked side by side, father and son, building something together that was about more than just survival. Around noon, Caleb's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He'd had enough surprises for one morning, but something made him pick up. Mr. Warren, this is Jennifer Hale, Victor's sister. Caleb's heart skipped. He didn't know Victor had a sister. Hello, Miss Hale. Is everything okay? Everything's fine. I'm calling because I run a foundation, the Hale Foundation for Accessibility and Independence. We fund projects that improve quality of life for people with disabilities. Victor told me what you did for Maya. She paused. I'd like to discuss a partnership. A partnership? We have funding. You have expertise and apparently an actual soul. I'd like to explore how we might work together to help more people like Maya. Would you be interested in a meeting? Caleb looked around his garage, at his son watching him with wide eyes, at the equipment that represented possibility, at the life that was unfolding in ways he couldn't have imagined 48 hours ago. "Yes," he said, "I'd be very interested." They scheduled a meeting for the following week. When Caleb hung up, Ethan was staring at him. "Was that about helping more people?" his son asked. "Yeah, it was." "Good." Ethan nodded seriously. "Because you're really good at that, Dad." Caleb felt his throat tighten. For 3 years, he'd been afraid he was failing his son, afraid he wasn't enough, afraid that not having money or security or stability made him a bad father. But looking at Ethan now, healthy because he finally had medicine, happy because his dad was present, proud because he understood what his father was trying to do, Caleb realized something. He hadn't been failing. He'd been surviving, and surviving until you can do more than survive. That's not failure. That's courage. That's love. That's exactly what parents do when the world is hard and money is tight, and the only thing you have to give is everything you've got. "I love you, buddy," Caleb said. "I love you too, Dad." They got back to work. Outside, the missing R on the old sign caught the afternoon light. Tomorrow, it would be replaced. Tomorrow, Warren's Auto and Mobility Repair would announce itself to the world. Tomorrow, Caleb would start helping the 17 people who'd called. But today, right now, in this moment, Caleb Warren was exactly where he needed to be. In a garage that now held possibility. With a son who was getting better. With a future that looked less like drowning and more like building something that mattered. One impossible promise had changed everything. And Caleb was just getting started. The sign installers arrived at 8 the next morning, 2 men in matching uniforms who looked at the old Warren's Auto Repair sign with its missing R and shared a knowing glance. Caleb watched from inside the garage as they carefully removed it. This piece of his failure made physical and set it against the wall. For 3 years, that broken sign had been the first thing he saw every morning, a daily reminder that he couldn't even afford to fix the thing that announced his business to the world. Now it was coming down. "Dad, can I keep it?" Ethan asked, standing beside him. "The old sign? Why?" "Because it's where we started. And Mrs. Chen says you should always remember where you started so you know how far you've come." Ethan looked up at him with those serious 7-year-old eyes. Plus, it's kind of cool, like a war scar. Caleb smiled despite himself. "Battle scar." "That's what I said." "All right, we'll keep it." The new sign went up in less than an hour. Warren's Auto and Mobility Repair. The letters were crisp, professional, visible from the street. When the installers finished and drove away, Caleb stood on the sidewalk with Ethan, both of them looking up at it. "It's really nice, Dad." "Yeah, it really is." "Does this mean we're not poor anymore?" The question hit Caleb like a punch. He knelt down, bringing himself to Ethan's eye level. "We're still figuring things out, buddy. The sign doesn't change that, but it means we have a chance to build something good, to help people and make enough money to be okay. That's what it means." "But you're not scared anymore. I can tell." Caleb wondered when his son had gotten so perceptive. When had Ethan learned to read the tension in his father's shoulders, the fear that Caleb had tried so hard to hide? 7 years old and already carrying the weight of understanding that their life had been precarious. "I'm always going to worry," Caleb said honestly. "That's what parents do." "But you're right. I'm not as scared because I remembered something important." "What?" "That I'm good at what I do and that people need what I can give them." He pulled Ethan into a hug. "And that I've got the best kid in the world, which makes everything else easier." "Even when I'm annoying? Especially when you're annoying." Ethan laughed, and the sound was so pure and uncomplicated that Caleb felt his chest tighten with love. This was what mattered, this moment, this kid, this chance to build something better than just survival. His phone rang. Dr. Chen from Mercy Hospital. "Mr. Warren, I have a situation. One of my patients, the woman I mentioned yesterday, her wheelchair just broke completely. The frame cracked. She's essentially immobile until it's fixed, and the medical supply company says it'll be 2 weeks before they can even look at it." Dr. Chen's voice was tight with frustration. "Is there any chance you could see her today? I know it's last minute, but give me the address. I'll head over now." "Thank you." Her name is Patricia Morales. She's 81 years old, and she lives alone. This chair is her independence. Caleb wrote down the address, grabbed his new toolbox, courtesy of Victor's equipment overhaul, and turned to Ethan. I've got to go help someone. You okay hanging with Mrs. Chen for a few hours? Can I come with you? Caleb hesitated. He'd never brought Ethan on a job before. It had always seemed unprofessional, inappropriate. But looking at his son's eager face, he reconsidered. What was he teaching Ethan by always leaving him behind? That work and family were separate? That helping people was something you did away from the people you loved? Yeah, Caleb said. Yeah, you can come. But you have to be quiet while I work, okay? And helpful. I'm always helpful. That's debatable. They drove across town in Caleb's truck, still burning oil, still making concerning sounds, but running. Patricia Morales lived in a small house in a neighborhood that reminded Caleb of his own, working class, worn down, but trying. The lawn needed mowing, the paint was peeling, but there were flowers and pots on the porch, carefully tended, fighting to bring beauty to a place that couldn't afford much beauty. Dr. Chen met them at the door. She was younger than Caleb expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and the tired expression of someone who cared too much in a system that didn't care enough. Thank you for coming so quickly, she said, shaking his hand. Then she looked down at Ethan. And who's this? My son, Ethan. I hope that's okay. He wanted to learn. It's more than okay. Patricia loves kids. Dr. Chen led them inside. Fair warning, she's going to offer you food. She can't afford it, but she'll offer anyway. Please accept. It'll hurt her feelings if you don't. The house was small and cluttered in the way houses get when mobility becomes difficult. Things piled up because bending down was hard, dishes in the sink because standing long enough to wash them was painful. But it was clean, and everywhere Caleb looked he saw signs of a life fully lived. Photographs covering the walls, books stacked on every surface, a sewing machine in the corner surrounded by fabric. Patricia Morales sat in a dining room chair, her broken wheelchair beside her, and when they entered she lit up with a smile that transformed her weathered face. Dr. Chen, you brought me help, and such handsome help, too. She looked at Ethan. What's your name, young man? Ethan Warren, ma'am. Such good manners. Are you going to be a doctor like Dr. Chen? I'm going to be a mechanic like my dad. Patricia's eyes shifted to Caleb, assessing him in the way old people do, seeing past the surface to something deeper. A mechanic who makes house calls. Now that's something you don't see anymore. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Chen said your wheelchair broke? Broke? Gave up? Died? Take your pick. Thing's been falling apart for months. I kept taping it, propping it, praying over it. This morning the frame just cracked right through. She gestured at the wheelchair. 20 years I've had that chair. We've been through a lot together. Caleb examined the wheelchair. It was old, basic, nothing like Maya's sophisticated equipment. Just a standard manual wheelchair, the kind insurance companies provided and expected to last forever despite constant use. The frame had indeed cracked, a stress fracture that had finally given way. But looking closer, Caleb could see a dozen other problems. Worn wheels, failing brakes, padding that had compressed to nothing. This chair hadn't just broken, it had been slowly dying for years. Can you fix it? Patricia asked. Caleb wanted to say yes, wanted to promise he could repair the crack, patch it together, give her back her mobility. But he'd learned something from Maya, learned that sometimes the kind thing wasn't the easy answer. Mrs. Morales, I can fix the crack. I can weld the frame, reinforce it, get you mobile again. He met her eyes. But this chair has more problems than just the brake. And even if I fix it, it's going to keep failing. Probably soon. Her face fell. I can't afford a new one. Insurance won't pay for a replacement for another 3 years. I'm stuck with this one. What if we didn't replace it? What if we rebuilt it? Rebuilt it? Caleb's mind was already working, seeing the possibilities. I can reinforce the frame properly, replace the wheels, fix the brake system, add proper padding, basically take what you have and make it actually work the way it should. He paused. It won't be pretty, and it won't be quick, but it'll be solid. And it'll be yours, fitted to you specifically, not some standard size that almost fits. Patricia looked at Dr. Chen. How much is this going to cost? Because I'm on a fixed income and… Mrs. Morales, Caleb interrupted gently. I'm not worried about payment right now. I'm worried about getting you mobile. We'll figure out the rest later. I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's an investment. Dr. Chen says you make quilts for the children's hospital. That's worth more than money. He smiled at her. Besides, I'm still building my reputation. You'll be one of my first mobility clients. If you're happy, you tell people. That's payment enough. It was partially true. But mostly, looking at this 81-year-old woman in her small house with her carefully tended flowers and her quilts made with hands that probably ached, Caleb couldn't bring himself to care about profit. Some things mattered more than money. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. You're a good man, Mr. Warren. I'm just a mechanic, ma'am. Now I'm going to need to take the chair back to my shop to do this properly. Can you manage with a temporary chair until I'm done? Dr. Chen stepped in. I can arrange a loaner from the hospital. How long will it take? Patricia asked. Caleb examined the chair again, mentally cataloging everything that needed work. With his new equipment, with the knowledge he'd gained from rebuilding Maya's chair, he could do this. Not in 24 hours, he wasn't making that promise again, but soon. 3 days, he said. Maybe 4. I'll call you every day with updates. 3 days I can manage. Patricia reached out and took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Thank you. You don't know what this means. But Caleb did know. He knew exactly what it meant to have your independence hanging by a thread, to be dependent on equipment that barely worked, to feel like the world had forgotten you existed. He knew because he'd felt that way himself, not physically, but economically, emotionally. The helplessness was the same. As they loaded the wheelchair into his truck, Ethan tugged on his sleeve. Dad, you're not charging her? Not right now, no. But how will we pay rent? Caleb crouched down to his son's level again. This was important. This was the lesson that mattered more than any other. Ethan, you know how sometimes you share your toys with kids who don't have any? Yeah. And you don't ask them to pay you, right? You share because it's the right thing to do? Yeah. This is the same thing. Mrs. Morales needs help. We can help her, so we do. And maybe somewhere down the line, someone will help us when we need it. Caleb touched his son's cheek. Money's important. We need it to survive. But it's not the only thing that matters. Sometimes being able to sleep at night knowing you did right, that matters more. Is that why you helped Maya even though you were scared? That's exactly why. Ethan thought about this seriously, then nodded. Okay, I think that's good. Me too, buddy. They drove back to the garage with Patricia's wheelchair rattling in the truck bed. Caleb spent the afternoon working on it while Ethan did homework at the workbench, occasionally asking questions about what his dad was doing. Caleb explained each step, how to identify weak points in the frame, how to properly weld metal, how to balance weight distribution. He wasn't sure how much a 7-year-old understood, but Ethan listened with rapt attention, absorbing everything. Around 4 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside. Caleb looked up from his welding to see Maya climbing out of the back seat, not in her father's chauffeured car, but under her own power, using hand controls Caleb hadn't seen before. She wheeled herself toward the garage with a confidence that made him smile. Maya, you're driving? Dad got me a modified car. Hand controls. I'm still learning, but... She grinned. Freedom, you know? I know. Caleb set down his welding torch. What brings you here? I wanted to see where the magic happened, where you work. She looked around the transformed garage. Wow, Dad really went all out. Your father is very generous. My father feels guilty. There's a difference. But Maya said it without bitterness. Although in this case, the guilt is producing good results, so I'm not complaining. Ethan had appeared from behind the workbench, staring at Maya with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood. Are you the girl my dad helped? I am. You must be Ethan. Your dad talks about you a lot. He does? All the time. He says you're smart and brave and helpful. Ethan beamed. Caleb felt his heart swell. He hadn't realized Maya was paying attention when he'd mentioned his son during their long night of work. Maya wheeled over to examine Patricia's wheelchair on the workbench. Another project? Patricia Morales, 81. Her frame cracked. And you're rebuilding it instead of just patching it. I'm rebuilding it instead of just patching it. Maya ran her hand along the frame where Caleb had already reinforced the weak points. You're good at this, at seeing what people actually need instead of what they say they need. I learned that from you. From me? You told me the chair was uncomfortable, but what you needed wasn't just comfort. You needed to be heard. You needed someone to believe that your experience of your own body was valid. Caleb gestured at Patricia's wheelchair. Same thing here. Mrs. Morales said she needed the crack fixed, but what she actually needs is a chair that works, that supports her, that gives her independence. The crack is just a symptom. Maya was quiet for a moment, studying him. My dad wants to offer you a job. Did he tell you? A job? Consulting for his foundation, working with his sister Jennifer on accessibility projects. Good money, steady income, all the resources you'd need. She paused. Are you going to take it? Caleb looked around his garage, at the new equipment, at Ethan watching them with interest, at Patricia's wheelchair waiting to be rebuilt, at the list of 17 names he'd written on a notepad, people who needed help. I don't know, he said honestly. Part of me wants to. The security, the resources, the chance to help more people. It's tempting. But another part of me worries that if I work for your dad, I'll lose something. Independence, maybe. Or the ability to make decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable. What if you could have both? I don't think that's how the world works. Maybe not usually, but my dad... Maya chose her words carefully. He's not trying to buy you, Caleb. He's trying to learn from you. You showed him something he'd forgotten, that money and resources don't mean anything without heart, without actually seeing people. She met his eyes. He wants to build something with you, not own you. There's a difference. How do you know? Because I talked to him, really talked to him, for the first time in months. And he told me about you, about how you made him realize he'd been treating me like a problem to solve instead of a person to listen to. Maya's voice softened. You changed my life, Caleb, but you also changed my dad's. He wants to help you change other people's lives, too. Not to control you, to enable you. Before Caleb could respond, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but Maya gestured for him to answer. This is Caleb. Mr. Warren, my name is Thomas Chen. I'm a professor at State University in the engineering department. Victor Hale gave me your number. The voice was professional, academic. I understand you've developed some innovative approaches to adaptive equipment modification. I'd like to discuss the possibility of you guest lecturing for my assistive technology class. Caleb blinked. Guest lecturing? I don't have a degree. I'm a mechanic. Which is precisely why I want you to speak to my students. They have plenty of theory. What they need is practical application, real-world problem-solving, and an understanding of the human element in engineering. Professor Chen paused. Would you be interested? Caleb looked at Maya, who was trying not to smile. Yes, I'd be interested. They scheduled a time. When Caleb hung up, Maya was grinning openly now. My dad's been busy, she said. Apparently. He's not trying to pressure you. He just wants people to know what you can do, to give you opportunities you wouldn't have otherwise. Maya wheeled closer. Take the consulting job or don't. That's your choice. But don't say no because you're afraid of losing yourself. Say no only if it's not what you want. What do you think I should do? I think you should do what you told Mrs. Morales. Figure out what you actually need, not what you think you should need. She smiled. You're good at that for other people. Try being good at it for yourself. After Maya left, Caleb returned to Patricia's wheelchair, but his mind was churning. Guest lecturing at the university, consulting for Victor's foundation, the 17 people who'd already called needing help. His son, finally healthy, finally able to just be a kid instead of worrying about whether they'd have enough money. What did he actually need? Security. Resources. The ability to help people without constantly worrying about survival, but also independence. The freedom to say yes to projects that mattered even if they weren't profitable. The ability to be present for Ethan instead of working 70-hour weeks just to stay afloat. Could he have both? Dad? Ethan's voice broke into his thoughts. Can I ask you something? Are we going to be okay now? Like, really okay? Caleb set down his tools and pulled Ethan into his lap. His son was getting too big for this, growing fast, but not too big yet. Not quite yet. I think so, buddy. I think we're going to be more than okay. Because of the people you helped. Because I stopped being afraid to ask for help myself. And because I remembered that being good at what you do matters more than being scared of failing. He kissed the top of Ethan's head. You taught me that, you know. I did? Yeah. Every time you were sick and scared, but you kept being brave anyway. Every time you told me you were okay, even when you weren't, because you were trying to protect me. You taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing even when you are afraid. Ethan was quiet against his chest. Then so softly, Caleb almost missed it. I was really scared, Dad, when you couldn't afford my medicine. I thought maybe we wouldn't make it. The words broke Caleb's heart, his 7-year-old son carrying that fear, hiding it to protect his father. He pulled Ethan closer, holding him tight. I was scared too, Caleb admitted. Every single day. But we made it, and we're going to keep making it. I promise you that. You can't promise that. Mrs. Chen says you can't promise things you can't control. Mrs. Chen is very wise, but I can promise this. I will never stop fighting for us. I will never stop trying to give you the life you deserve. And I will never, ever give up. He pulled back so he could look Ethan in the eyes. That's a promise I can keep, because it's about what I do, not what happens to us. Ethan nodded, and Caleb could see some of the fear leave his son's face. Not all of it. Fear doesn't disappear that easily. But enough. Enough for now. They worked together the rest of the afternoon. Caleb explained what he was doing as he reinforced Patricia's wheelchair frame, and Ethan handed him tools, asking questions, learning. It was peaceful in a way Caleb hadn't experienced in years. Just father and son, working together, building something that would help someone else. Around 6 p.m., another car pulled up. This one Caleb recognized, Victor's Mercedes. But it wasn't the chauffeur who got out. It was Victor himself, dressed casually, carrying 2 large bags from a restaurant Caleb had never been able to afford. I brought dinner, Victor said, walking into the garage. I figured you'd be working late, and I wanted to talk. Mr. Hale. Victor. Please. Mr. Hale is what people call me when they want something. He set the bags on the workbench. I brought enough for 3. I hope that's okay. Ethan's eyes had gone wide at the smell of food. Real food. Restaurant food. The kind that came in proper containers instead of paper wrappers. Caleb wanted to say no. Wanted to maintain some boundary between his life and Victor's world. But his son was practically vibrating with excitement. And honestly, Caleb was hungry. That's very generous, Caleb said. Thank you. They ate sitting on workbenches and stools, the fancy food incongruous in the garage setting. Victor had brought steak, pasta, salad, bread that was still warm. Ethan ate like he'd never seen food before, and Caleb didn't have the heart to tell him to slow down. Maya told me she came by, Victor said between bites. She did. She's doing well. The chair is working perfectly? Better than perfectly. She's driving now, taking classes online, talking about college. Victor's expression was complicated, pride mixed with sadness. I've got my daughter back. The real Maya, not the one who was trying to survive in a chair that hurt her. I'm glad. It's because of you. It's because you were willing to listen, to take a chance on a mechanic with no credentials. I took a chance on a father who understood what it meant to see your child suffer. Victor set down his fork. Which brings me to why I'm really here. I want to formally offer you a position as a consultant for the Hale Foundation. You'd work with my sister Jennifer on accessibility projects. We'd cover all your expenses, provide equipment, pay a salary that would let you stop worrying about rent. There it was, the offer. The security Caleb had been dreaming about for 3 years. What would I have to give up? Caleb asked. Victor looked surprised. Give up? My garage, my independence, the ability to take on projects like Mrs. Morales, even though there's no profit in it. Caleb met his eyes. What would working for you cost me? Nothing. You'd keep the garage, keep your independence. We'd supplement your income, not replace it. Victor leaned forward. Then, Caleb, I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to partner with you. You have skills and insights that my foundation needs. We have resources and reach that could help you help more people. It's collaborative, not controlling. And when I want to take on a project that doesn't align with the foundation's goals, then you take it on using your garage, your time, your discretion. The foundation work would be separate. Specific projects we'd bring to you for consultation and modification. But your personal work, the people who come to you directly, that stays yours. Caleb wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that he could have security without losing himself. But he'd been burned before, by landlords who promised flexibility and then raised rent, by clients who promised payment and then disappeared, by a world that said hard work was enough and then proved it wasn't. Can I think about it? Caleb asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. Victor stood up, gathering the empty food containers. But Caleb, whatever you decide, the equipment I gave you, it's yours. The calls from doctors and therapists, those are yours too. I'm not taking any of it back. You earned it. I fixed one wheelchair. You did more than that. You reminded me why I started the foundation in the first place. After Maya's mother left, when I was trying to figure out how to give my daughter a good life, I promised myself I'd use my resources to help other families like ours. Families dealing with disability, accessibility, the constant fight for basic dignity. Victor's voice roughened. But somewhere along the way, it became about money and projects and metrics instead of people. You reminded me that people are the point. He headed for the door, then paused. The guest lecture Professor Chen asked you to do? I'd encourage you to say yes. My engineers could learn from you. Hell, I could learn from you. He smiled. Teach them what you taught me. That credentials matter less than caring. That the best solutions come from listening. That sometimes the person with the least fancy title has the most important insight. After Victor left, Caleb and Ethan cleaned up the garage in comfortable silence. Ethan was practically glowing from the meal, from the attention, from the sense that their life was changing in ways that were good instead of terrifying. I like him, Ethan said as they locked up for the night. Mr. Hale? Yeah, he's rich, but he's not mean about it. And he really loves his daughter. You can tell. How can you tell? The way he talks about her, the same way you talk about me. Ethan looked up at him. Are you going to take the job? I don't know yet. What do you think? Ethan considered this with the seriousness that always surprised Caleb. I think you should do what makes you happy, not what makes us have more money, because you're not happy when you're only worried about money. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't always notice. Caleb laughed, and the sound echoed in the garage, bouncing off the new equipment and the new sign and the new possibilities that had opened up in the space of one impossible week. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Caleb sat at their small kitchen table with a notepad and tried to make sense of his life. On one side of the page, he wrote all the reasons to take Victor's offer: security, resources, the ability to help more people, a steady income that would let him breathe. On the other side, he wrote his fears: loss of independence, becoming beholden to someone else's vision, losing the garage, losing himself. But as he stared at the two columns, he realized he was asking the wrong question. This wasn't about whether to take the job or not. It was about trust. Did he trust Victor? Did he trust himself? Did he trust that he could accept help without losing who he was? He thought about Maya, who trusted him to help when every specialist had failed. He thought about Patricia Morales, who trusted him with her independence. He thought about Ethan, who trusted that his father would find a way even when there was no obvious way to find. Trust was terrifying, but it was also the only way forward. Caleb pulled out his phone and called Victor. It rang 3 times before he answered. Caleb, is everything okay? I'll take the job, Caleb said, but I have conditions. Name them. I keep full control of my garage and the work I do there. The foundation projects are separate. I'll consult, I'll modify equipment, I'll do whatever you need. But my personal clients, the people who come to me directly, those decisions are mine alone. Agreed. I want the right to say no to foundation projects if they don't align with my values. If you want me to create something that's more about profit than people, I walk. Agreed. And I want to be able to bring Ethan with me sometimes. Not to every consultation, but when it's appropriate. I want him to see what this work looks like, to learn that helping people matters. Victor was quiet for a moment. Then, agreed. Anything else? One more thing. I want Mrs. Morales' wheelchair rebuild to be the first official foundation project. I want you to pay her what you would pay anyone else for a custom modification, because she deserves to feel like she's getting professional care, not charity. Caleb, that's... Victor paused. That's perfect. Absolutely. We'll make it official. Then I'm in. Welcome to the team. Victor's voice was warm. I think this is going to be good, Caleb. For both of us. For a lot of people. I hope you're right. I am, and I'll prove it to you. Victor paused. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Jennifer wants to meet with you first thing. After they hung up, Caleb sat in the darkness of his apartment, looking at the notepad with its 2 columns of reasons. He picked up his pen and wrote one more thing, right across the middle, connecting both sides. Sometimes you have to trust that help is actually help. It was a lesson he'd learned from Patricia, from Maya, from Victor, from every person who'd reached out to him this week. That accepting help wasn't weakness, that building something bigger than yourself required letting other people in, that he didn't have to do everything alone. For 3 years, Caleb had been drowning because he'd been too proud or too scared to admit he was drowning. He told himself that asking for help meant failing, that a real father, a real man, could handle everything on his own. But that was a lie. Nobody handles everything on their own. Everyone needs help sometimes. The trick is recognizing when help is genuine and having the courage to accept it. Caleb looked around his small apartment. Tomorrow, he'd meet with Jennifer Hale. He'd start his first official foundation project. He'd continue rebuilding Patricia's wheelchair with resources that meant he could do it right instead of making do. Tomorrow, his life would continue changing in ways he couldn't fully predict. But tonight, right now, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of a drowning man grasping at straws, but the solid, grounded hope of someone who'd found footing, who discovered that his skills mattered, that his heart mattered, that who he was when stripped of everything else was enough. He was enough. And tomorrow, he'd start proving it. Morning came with unexpected clarity. Caleb woke before his alarm, not from anxiety but from anticipation, and the difference was startling. For the first time in 3 years, he wanted to face the day instead of just surviving it. Ethan was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal, swinging his legs and humming. The medicine had worked. His cough was gone, his color was back, and he looked like a normal 7-year-old instead of a sick child trying to be brave. Big day, Ethan said through a mouthful of cereal. How do you know it's a big day? Because you're smiling. You don't smile in the morning unless something good is happening. Caleb realized his son was right. He was smiling. Actually smiling, not the forced expression he'd been wearing for months. I'm meeting with Ms. Hale this morning about the foundation work. The helping people work. Yeah, the helping people work. Good. Ethan went back to his cereal with the satisfied air of someone who'd pronounced judgment and found it acceptable. They drove to the Hale Foundation headquarters together. Caleb hadn't wanted to leave Ethan with Mrs. Chen again, and Jennifer had said on the phone last night that children were welcome. The building was downtown, a modern glass structure that screamed money and importance. Caleb's truck looked ridiculous in the parking garage next to the Tesla and Mercedes, and one Bentley that probably cost more than his entire life. Dad, Ethan whispered as they walked through the marble lobby. This place is fancy. Yeah, it is. But remember what we talked about. Fancy doesn't mean better. It just means different. I know, but it's still really fancy. The receptionist directed them to the 8th floor, where Jennifer Hale's office occupied a corner with windows overlooking the city. She was waiting when the elevator doors opened, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes, Victor's dark hair going silver, and an air of competent authority that reminded Caleb of his mother. Caleb Warren, she said, extending her hand, and you must be Ethan. Your father's told me you're interested in mechanics. Ethan shook her hand solemnly. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to help people like my dad does. Then we're going to get along very well. Jennifer gestured toward her office. Come in. I've got coffee for your dad and hot chocolate for you, if that's all right. They settled into comfortable chairs that probably cost more than Caleb's rent. Jennifer's office was professional but personal. Photographs on the walls showing her with people in wheelchairs, using walkers, navigating the world with various mobility devices. One photo showed her younger, standing beside a man in a wheelchair, both of them laughing. "My husband," Jennifer said, following Caleb's gaze. "David." He passed away 5 years ago. Multiple sclerosis. We spent 20 years fighting insurance companies, dealing with inadequate equipment, and watching him lose independence because the systems in place weren't designed for actual people. Her expression hardened. "That's why this foundation exists, and that's why I wanted to meet with you." She pulled out a tablet and brought up images. Wheelchairs, walkers, braces, adaptive equipment of every kind. Some were clearly expensive and high-tech. Others were basic, practical, held together with modifications and hope. "This is what the medical equipment industry gives people," Jennifer said. "Standard designs, one size fits most, take it or leave it. Insurance companies pay for the cheapest options. Specialists recommend the most expensive. And in the middle are real people whose bodies don't fit the molds and whose wallets can't afford custom solutions." Caleb studied the images. He recognized some of the equipment from his own work. Saw the same problems he'd been fixing for years. Poor weight distribution, inadequate support, designs that prioritized manufacturing efficiency over human comfort. "What my brother told me about what you did for Maya," Jennifer continued, "is that you didn't start with equipment. You started with her. You listened to what her body was telling her instead of trusting what the specs said should work." She leaned forward. "That's what we need. Someone who sees the person first and the equipment second." "I'm not an engineer," Caleb said. "I don't have formal training in biomechanics or assistive technology or any of the things your foundation probably needs." "No, you have something better. You have empathy married to practical skill. You know how things work, and you care about whether they work for actual people." Jennifer pulled up another image. A young boy, maybe 10, struggling with a walker that clearly didn't fit him properly. "This is Marcus. His walker is too tall, the handles are positioned wrong, and he's developing back problems from compensating. The company that made it says it's built to standard specifications. His insurance won't pay for modifications. His parents can't afford private care. And you want me to fix it? I want you to do what you did for Maya. See what he actually needs. Build something that works for him, not what works in theory." Jennifer looked at him steadily. "And then I want you to teach our engineers how to think the way you think, how to design with people instead of around them." Caleb felt the weight of it settling on him. This wasn't just about fixing a few wheelchairs. This was about changing how people approached the entire problem. Teaching engineers to think like mechanics. Teaching designers to prioritize comfort over elegance. Teaching a whole industry to actually listen. "That's a lot of pressure," he said quietly. "It is. But you've already proven you can handle it. Maya's not just comfortable now, she's thriving, and that happened because you cared more about getting it right than about being right." Jennifer glanced at Ethan, who was watching the conversation with wide eyes. "Your son's watching you, learning from you. What do you want to teach him?" It was a pointed question, but not unfair. Caleb looked at Ethan, thought about all the lessons he'd tried to impart. Work hard. Be honest. Don't give up. But watching his son's face now, he realized there was another lesson Ethan needed to learn. That sometimes you say yes to the scary thing because it matters. "All right," Caleb said. "I'm in. Tell me about Marcus." The smile that crossed Jennifer's face was pure relief. "Marcus Chen, 10 years old, cerebral palsy affecting his lower body. He's bright, funny, wants to play soccer more than anything, but his current walker limits his mobility and causes pain. His parents have spent thousands trying different equipment, and nothing works right. When can I meet him?" "This afternoon, if you're free. I've already arranged for him and his parents to come to your garage." Jennifer pulled up a schedule on her tablet. "Over the next month, I've got 6 other cases lined up. Different ages, different needs, different equipment. Your job is to assess each one, make modifications or build new solutions, and document your process so our engineering team can learn from it." "Document my process?" "Photos, notes, explanations of why you made specific choices. Nothing fancy, Just your thinking. Jennifer smiled. Consider it translation work. You speak the language of practical application. Our engineers speak theory. We need you to bridge the gap. They spent the next 2 hours going over cases, discussing logistics, establishing protocols. Jennifer was thorough and organized in a way that made Caleb feel both supported and slightly overwhelmed. She'd arranged for materials suppliers, set up accounts for him to order whatever he needed, and established a payment structure that made his head spin. The foundation would pay him a consulting fee for each case, plus cover all materials and expenses. It was more money than he'd made in the past 6 months combined. "This feels like too much," Caleb said at one point. "It's exactly right. You're providing expertise we can't get anywhere else. That has value." Jennifer closed her tablet. "Now, I want to show you something." She led them down the hall to a large conference room. Inside, a dozen people sat around a table: engineers, designers, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, and several people in wheelchairs who Jennifer introduced as foundation advisors. "Everyone," Jennifer said, "this is Caleb Warren and his son Ethan. Caleb's going to be consulting with us on equipment modification and design. I want him to tell you about what he did for Maya." Caleb hadn't prepared a presentation, hadn't expected to be put on the spot like this. But looking at the faces around the table, some skeptical, some curious, all waiting, he realized this was the test. Could he explain what he did in a way that made engineers understand? Could he translate intuition into language that made sense? "I'm not going to give you theory," Caleb started. "I'm going to tell you what happened. Maya Hale's wheelchair was built by specialists, designed with precision, and it hurt her every day for 6 months. When I looked at it, I saw brilliant engineering and terrible application. Everything was optimized for ideal posture according to models. But Maya wasn't a model. She was a real person with a real body." He walked them through the night he'd spent rebuilding the chair, how he'd measured not just dimensions, but how Maya actually moved, how he'd tested materials not for their specs, but for how they felt, how he'd adjusted and readjusted based on Maya's feedback instead of trusting calculations. "The specialists did everything right according to their training," Caleb said. "They just forgot to listen to the person using the equipment, and that's the difference between something that should work and something that does work." One of the engineers raised his hand. "But how do you scale that? How do you create individualized solutions for hundreds or thousands of people? The custom approach you're describing is too time-intensive for mass production." "Then maybe we're asking the wrong question," Caleb said. "Maybe instead of scaling customization, we create equipment that's designed to be easily modified. Modular components, adjustable frameworks, systems that can be adapted by the user or their local mechanic instead of requiring specialized engineers." He thought about Patricia's wheelchair, about the dozen other repairs he'd done over the years. Most people don't need perfect from day one. They need good enough that can become perfect through adjustment, build for adaptability, not for one size fits most. The room went quiet. Caleb worried he'd overstepped, said something stupid, revealed his lack of formal training. But then one of the wheelchair users, a woman maybe 40, with intelligent eyes, started nodding. "That's exactly right," she said. "I've been through 6 different chairs in 15 years. Each one cost a fortune. Each one was supposedly custom built for me. And each one needed modifications within months because my body isn't static. I change. My needs change. But the chairs are built like they're permanent solutions instead of evolving tools." Another person chimed in, then another. The room erupted into discussion. Engineers debating with users, designers questioning assumptions, the physical therapist pointing out how current equipment limited rather than enabled. Caleb stood there watching, Ethan pressed against his side as the conversation he'd started took on a life of its own. Jennifer caught his eye and smiled. This was what she'd wanted, not a lecture, a spark, someone to shake up the thinking and make people question their assumptions. After the meeting, as Caleb and Ethan were leaving, one of the engineers stopped them in the hallway. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the earnest intensity of someone who cared deeply about his work. "Mr. Warren, I just wanted to say, what you described in there, it's everything I've been trying to articulate for years. I got into assistive technology because my sister uses a wheelchair, and I've watched her struggle with equipment that doesn't fit. But I've also been taught that engineering is about optimization, efficiency, scalability. You just gave me permission to care about the individual first. You don't need my permission, Caleb said. Maybe not. But sometimes it helps to hear someone else say it's okay to prioritize the person over the product. The engineer extended his hand. I'm James Park. I'd love to shadow you sometime, if you'd allow it. Learn how you approach these problems. They exchanged information. As Caleb walked to his truck with Ethan, his phone buzzed with 3 more contact requests from people who'd been in the meeting. This was happening. He was becoming something more than just a mechanic with a garage. He was becoming a voice in a conversation that needed new perspectives. Dad, that was really cool, Ethan said as they drove back across town. All those smart people listening to you. They weren't listening to me because I'm smart. They were listening because I said something they needed to hear. What's the difference? Caleb thought about how to explain it. Being smart is about knowing things. But sometimes the most important thing isn't knowledge, it's perspective. Seeing things from an angle other people miss. Those engineers are brilliant, but they've been trained to think a certain way. I think differently because I come from a different place. That's valuable, even if I don't have their credentials. So I can be valuable even if I'm just a kid. You're already valuable, Ethan. You see things I miss all the time. Like yesterday, when you noticed Mrs. Chen was sad even though she was smiling. I didn't see that. You did. That's your perspective, and it matters. Ethan was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, I think I want to help people like you do. Not just fix things, but see people. Caleb's throat tightened. I think you already do, buddy. Back at the garage, Marcus Chen and his parents arrived right on schedule. Marcus was small for 10, with bright eyes and a smile that lit up his whole face despite the obvious discomfort he was in using his walker. His parents looked exhausted, the particular exhaustion that comes from fighting bureaucracy and insurance companies and medical supply companies that don't care. Mr. Warren? Marcus's mother extended her hand. I'm Lisa. This is my husband Tom, and this is Marcus. Thank you so much for seeing us. Please, call me Caleb. He knelt down to Marcus's level. And you must be the soccer player I've heard about. Marcus's face lit up. You know about that? Ms. Hale told me. Said you've got serious skills. I used to, before the walker got too small. Marcus's expression dimmed. Now I can barely walk without hurting. Caleb examined the walker. Jennifer had been right. It was completely wrong for Marcus. Too tall, forcing him to reach up to grip the handles. The wheels were positioned in a way that made turning difficult. The frame was rigid where it needed flexibility and flexible where it needed support. Can I try something? Caleb asked. I want to see how you move naturally, without the walker, just for a minute. Your parents will be right here to help if you need it. Marcus looked at his parents, who nodded nervously. Caleb helped him step away from the walker, supporting him but not controlling him. Then he let Marcus try to walk on his own, just a few steps. He watched how Marcus's body compensated for his cerebral palsy, how his balance shifted, where he naturally put his weight. Okay, that's great. You can use the walker again. Caleb helped Marcus back into position, but his mind was already racing. Marcus, if you could have any kind of walker in the world, not what exists, but what you wish existed, what would it be like? Marcus thought about it seriously. It wouldn't hurt my back, and I could turn fast like when I'm playing. And it wouldn't look like hospital equipment. It would look cool. Cool is important, Caleb agreed. What else? It would be light. This one is so heavy. I get tired just moving it around. Anything else? Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, I wish it didn't make me feel different. Like everyone knows I need help. I just want to feel normal. Caleb's heart broke a little. 10 years old and already carrying the weight of being different, of standing out, of medical equipment that announced his disability to the world instead of just enabling him to navigate it. I can't make you normal, Caleb said gently, because you're already normal. You're just Marcus, who happens to need help walking, same as some people need help seeing and wear glasses. But I can make you a walker that works better, that fits you, that maybe doesn't feel quite so much like hospital equipment. Really? Really. Give me a week. I'm going to build you something that's actually designed for you, not for what the manufacturing specs say a 10-year-old need. Marcus's parents looked skeptical but hopeful, that dangerous combination of wanting to believe but being afraid to be disappointed again. Caleb knew that look. He'd worn it himself for years. "We've been promised custom solutions before," Tom said carefully. "They never quite work out. I understand, and I can't promise perfection, but I can promise I'll listen to Marcus, that I'll build for him specifically, not for some average kid who doesn't exist. And if it doesn't work, we'll adjust it until it does." Caleb met their eyes. This isn't one and done. It's a process. Marcus's needs will change as he grows. The walker should change with him. "How much is this going to cost?" Lisa asked, and Caleb heard the fear in her voice. The fear of getting their hopes up only to find out they couldn't afford it. "The foundation is covering it. Your only cost is time. Bringing Marcus in for fittings, giving me feedback, being patient while I figure this out." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. Tom put his arm around her. Marcus looked between his parents, understanding more than a 10-year-old should have to understand about money and medical equipment and the constant struggle to get basic needs met. After they left, Ethan helped Caleb take measurements and notes. They documented Marcus's current walker, photographed the problems, sketched ideas for improvements. Caleb found himself explaining his thinking out loud, not just to Ethan, but into his phone's voice recorder, the documentation Jennifer had requested. "The current walker forces Marcus into an unnatural position," Caleb recorded. "His handles are too high, which means his shoulders are constantly elevated. This creates tension in his upper back and neck. For a kid with cerebral palsy affecting his lower body, we're creating new problems in his upper body just to accommodate standard sizing. Solution? Custom handle positioning based on Marcus's natural arm position with adjustability built in for growth." He continued like this for an hour, documenting every observation and decision. It felt strange at first, explaining the things he knew instinctively. But as he talked, he realized he was creating a roadmap, not just for Marcus's walker, but for how to approach any assistive equipment modification. How to see the person first, how to question assumptions, how to build for reality instead of theory. By evening, Caleb had a plan for Marcus's walker. He'd sketched designs, calculated materials, and mapped out a construction timeline. It would take a week, maybe less. He'd build the frame lighter using aluminum alloys. He'd position the handles based on Marcus's actual measurements, not standard sizing charts. He'd add larger, more responsive wheels that would give Marcus the maneuverability he needed. And he'd anodize the metal in blue, Marcus's favorite color, so it looked less like medical equipment and more like something a 10-year-old would actually want to use. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Caleb sat in the garage surrounded by his sketches and materials and let himself feel the magnitude of what was happening. A week ago, he'd been drowning. Couldn't afford medicine for his son. 3 months behind on rent. Business failing, future uncertain. Now he had resources, purpose, and a schedule full of people who needed his help. He had a partnership with a foundation that could amplify his work. He had engineers wanting to learn from him. He had a son who was healthy and happy, and learning that helping people mattered. How had everything changed so fast? The answer, he realized, was simple. He'd said yes, not to the easy thing, not to the safe thing, but to the impossible thing. He'd promised Victor he could rebuild Maya's wheelchair in 24 hours, even though he had no idea if he could actually do it. He'd taken a leap into uncertainty because someone needed help, and he had the skills to provide it. And that one yes had opened every other door. His phone buzzed, a text from Victor. Just a photo. Maya at a coffee shop, her wheelchair positioned comfortably at a table surrounded by friends, laughing at something someone had said. She looked happy, normal, like a 17-year-old living her life instead of surviving through pain. Under the photo, "Thank you for everything." Caleb stared at the image for a long time. This was why it mattered. Not the money or the foundation work or the professional recognition. This, a girl who could sit with her friends without hurting, who could laugh without compensating for equipment that didn't fit, who could just be a teenager. He texted back, "She looks great. How's she doing?" The response came quickly. "Better than great. She's applying to colleges, wants to study biomedical engineering, says she wants to design equipment that actually works for people." A pause, then another text. "She says you inspired her. showed her that the best solutions come from understanding people, not just understanding engineering. Caleb felt his eyes sting. She inspired me first, taught me that listening matters more than expertise. Well, you've started something. Jennifer says the engineering team hasn't stopped talking about your presentation. You've got them questioning everything they thought they knew about assistive equipment design. Is that a good thing? It's a necessary thing. Change is uncomfortable, but it's overdue. Another pause. Get some rest, Caleb. Big week ahead. Marcus's walker is just the beginning. Caleb set down his phone and looked around his garage, at the equipment Victor had provided, at the sketches for Marcus's walker spread across the workbench, at the sign outside that now said Warren's Auto and Mobility Repair, at the life he was building from the wreckage of the life that had been falling apart. He thought about Patricia Morales, whose wheelchair he'd finish tomorrow, about Marcus Chen, who wanted to play soccer and feel normal, about the 17 other people who'd called needing help, about Maya, thriving now, planning a future, about Ethan, healthy and learning and proud of his father. This was what purpose felt like, not the absence of fear or struggle or uncertainty, but the presence of meaning, the knowledge that what he did mattered in ways that went beyond survival, that his skills could change lives, that caring was as important as competence, that sometimes the most valuable thing you could offer wasn't expertise, but humanity. Caleb Warren, single father and struggling mechanic, had stumbled into something bigger than himself. Not because he was special or brilliant or formally educated, but because he'd seen a girl in pain and decided that was unacceptable. Because he'd made an impossible promise and then worked through the night to keep it. Because he'd let himself be helped after years of trying to do everything alone. One choice. One night. One wheelchair. And everything had changed. Tomorrow he'd start building Marcus's walker. He'd finish Patricia's wheelchair. He'd meet with the next client Jennifer had lined up. He'd continue documenting his process, teaching engineers to think differently, building a body of work that could help people he'd never meet. Tomorrow, he'd continue becoming the person he hadn't known he could be. But tonight, in the quiet of his garage with the city sleeping around him, Caleb allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. Pride. Not arrogance. Not self-importance. Just quiet pride in work well done, in promises kept, in a life that was finally moving forward instead of just trying not to fall apart. He was enough. His skills were enough. His heart was enough. And that was more than enough to change the world, one wheelchair at a time. The week that followed became a blur of metal and measurements, of early mornings and late nights, of problems solved and new challenges discovered. Caleb worked on Marcus's walker with the same focused intensity he'd brought to Maya's wheelchair, but this time he wasn't alone. Ethan helped after school, handing him tools and asking questions. James Park, the young engineer from the foundation, came by twice to observe and take notes. Even Victor stopped in one afternoon, watching silently as Caleb bent aluminum tubing to the precise angles Marcus's body needed. "You make it look easy," Victor had said. "It's not easy. It's just necessary." Caleb had looked up from his work, wiping sweat from his forehead. When you know someone's counting on you, you find a way. By Thursday afternoon, Marcus's walker was nearly complete. The frame was lightweight aluminum, anodized in electric blue that caught the light. The handles were positioned exactly where Marcus's hands naturally fell, padded with gel cushioning that would absorb impact without creating pressure points. The wheels were larger than standard, with precision bearings that would make turning effortless. And Caleb had added one modification he hadn't mentioned to anyone, a subtle soccer ball pattern etched into the frame's side panels. "Dad, it's really cool," Ethan said, running his hand along the blue metal. "Marcus is going to love it." "I hope so, but more than that, I hope it works. Cool doesn't matter if it hurts him. It'll work. You always make things work." Caleb wished he had his son's confidence, but doubt was a familiar companion, whispering that he'd missed something, that the walker wouldn't fit right, that he'd let Marcus down the way so many specialists had let Maya down. He pushed the doubt aside and focused on the final adjustments, checking and rechecking every joint, every measurement, every detail that could make the difference between equipment that helped and equipment that hurt. Friday morning arrived with the weight of a deadline. Patricia Morales was coming at 10 to pick up her rebuilt wheelchair. Marcus and his parents were scheduled for 11. And at 2, Caleb had his first guest lecture at the university, Professor Chen's assistive technology class, where he'd been asked to talk about practical problem solving in equipment modification. It felt like too much, like the universe was testing how much he could handle before he broke. But when he walked downstairs to the garage and saw both finished pieces of equipment waiting, Patricia's reinforced wheelchair with its new cushioning and support systems, Marcus's sleek blue walker with its custom positioning, he felt something shift inside him. He hadn't broken. He'd built. Patricia arrived first, driven by her neighbor since she'd been unable to navigate her temporary loaner wheelchair into her own car. Dr. Chen accompanied them, professional concern masking personal investment. When Patricia saw her wheelchair, the frame reinforced and repainted, new wheels gleaming, cushioning that looked like it belonged in expensive equipment rather than a 20-year-old insurance-provided chair, her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my," she whispered. "Is that really mine?" "It's really yours," Caleb confirmed. "Want to try it?" He helped her transfer from the loaner to her rebuilt chair, and the change was immediate. Patricia's whole body relaxed in a way Caleb recognized from Maya's first moment in her modified wheelchair. The new cushioning supported without constraining. The reinforced frame held steady without rigidity. The repositioned armrests allowed her shoulders to drop naturally instead of hunching. Patricia rolled forward experimentally, then back, then executed a turn that would have been impossible in the old configuration. Her eyes filled with tears. 20 years, she said, her voice breaking. 20 years I've been using this chair, and it's never felt like this. Never felt like it was actually mine instead of something I had to fight against. "How's your back?" Dr. Chen asked, watching carefully. "It doesn't hurt. There's no pain." Patricia looked up at Caleb with an expression that made his throat tight. "You gave me my life back. Do you understand that? My independence, my ability to move through my own home without suffering, you gave that back to me." "You never lost it, Mrs. Morales. The equipment just wasn't working right. Now it is." "Don't diminish what you did." Dr. Chen's voice was firm. "I've been Patricia's doctor for 3 years. I've watched her decline because her wheelchair was inadequate, and I couldn't get insurance to approve modifications. I've written letters, filed appeals, fought bureaucracy, and in 1 week, you accomplished what the entire medical system couldn't do in 3 years. That's not a compliment to me, that's an indictment of the system. It's both." Dr. Chen pulled out her phone. "I'm documenting this. The foundation needs to see the before and after, and I'm sending this to every doctor I know who has patients struggling with inadequate equipment. You've just become my go-to referral." After Patricia left, rolling her wheelchair out to her neighbor's car under her own power, moving with confidence and ease, Caleb had 15 minutes before Marcus arrived. He used the time to check Marcus's walker one more time, testing every joint, ensuring every adjustment was locked in place. Ethan sat on the workbench, watching his father, with an expression that was equal parts pride and nervousness. "What if it doesn't work?" Ethan asked quietly. "Then we fix it until it does." "But what if you can't fix it? What if you mess up?" Caleb stopped what he was doing and looked at his son. Really looked at him. Ethan was chewing his bottom lip, a habit he'd developed when he was worried. And Caleb realized his son wasn't asking about Marcus's walker. He was asking about all of it, about whether this new life they were building was real or just another thing that would fall apart. "Ethan, come here." Caleb pulled his son into a hug. "I might mess up. Probably will at some point. Nobody's perfect. Not even the experts who charge thousands of dollars for their work. But you know what the difference is now?" "What?" "I'm not alone anymore. I've got the foundation supporting me. I've got engineers who want to help. I've got your mom's insurance finally covering your medicine, and rent is paid, and we're not drowning." He pulled back to look Ethan in the eyes. "But most importantly, I've got you. And as long as we're together, we can handle whatever comes. Understand? Even if Marcus doesn't like the walker? Even then. Because if he doesn't like it, we'll modify it. We'll listen to what he needs and we'll adjust. That's what this work is, listening and adjusting and never giving up on getting it right." A car pulled up outside. Through the garage windows, Caleb could see Marcus climbing out of the back seat, maneuvering with his too-tall walker, his parents hovering anxiously. The moment of truth had arrived. Marcus saw the blue walker before he even entered the garage. His eyes went wide, then wider, tracking from the sleek frame to the soccer ball etchings to the perfectly positioned handles. "Is that mine?" His voice was small, afraid to hope. "That's yours. Want to try it?" What followed was the most nerve-wracking 10 minutes of Caleb's life. He helped Marcus out of his old walker and into position with the new one, adjusting the boy's hands on the handles, making sure his weight distributed properly. Marcus stood there for a moment, just feeling it, his expression unreadable. Then he took a step. The walker moved smoothly, responsively. Marcus took another step, then another. His posture was different, straighter, more natural. His shoulders weren't hunched. His back wasn't compensating. He was just walking, the walker supporting him instead of fighting him. "It's light," Marcus said wonderingly. "It feels like nothing." "Can you turn?" Caleb asked. Marcus executed a smooth turn, the larger wheels making it effortless. Then he did it again, faster. His face split into a grin. "I can move, like really move, not slow shuffle walk, actual moving." He looked at his parents, his expression radiant. "Mom, Dad, watch this." He demonstrated turning, backing up, moving forward with speed that would have been impossible with his old walker. His mother was crying. His father had his hand over his mouth. And Marcus looked like someone who'd just discovered he could fly. "The soccer balls," Marcus said, noticing the etching. "You put soccer balls on it." "Figured you needed the reminder that this is just equipment. It doesn't define you. You're still Marcus who wants to play soccer. The walker just helps you get where you're going." Marcus looked at Caleb with an expression too mature for 10 years old. "Thank you. Nobody's ever—" His voice caught. "Everyone always tried to fix me, like I was broken. You just fixed the walker." "You were never broken, Marcus. The equipment was." Lisa Chen came forward, tears streaming down her face, and pulled Caleb into a hug. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing my son instead of just seeing his disability. Thank you for giving him the chance to just be a kid." Tom shook Caleb's hand, his grip firm. "How much do we owe you?" "Whatever it is, we'll find a way. The foundation covered it. Your only job is to let me know if anything needs adjusting as Marcus grows. This is built to be modified. As he gets taller, stronger, as his needs change, we adjust. Deal?" "Deal," Tom said, his voice thick. They stayed for another hour, Marcus testing the walker in different conditions. On smooth floor, on the rough pavement outside, navigating around obstacles. Every test confirmed what Caleb had hoped. The walker worked. Not just functionally, but for Marcus specifically. It fit his body, supported his movement, and gave him the independence he'd been missing. After they left, Marcus insisting on walking to the car under his own power, refusing help, radiating joy, Ethan turned to his father. "You did it again." "We did it. You helped." "No, Dad. You did it. You saw what Marcus needed and you built it. Just like with Maya. Just like with Mrs. Morales." Ethan's expression was serious. "You're really good at this. At helping people." "I'm learning to be, but I couldn't do it without you, buddy. You keep me grounded. Remind me why it matters." They cleaned up the garage quickly. Caleb had to leave in 20 minutes to make it to the university in time for his lecture. He'd prepared some notes, printed out photos of his work, but mostly he was planning to just talk honestly about what he'd learned, about listening to people, about questioning assumptions, about the difference between building for specifications and building for humans. The drive to State University took 15 minutes. The engineering building was modern, all glass and steel, with students hurrying between classes with backpacks and coffee cups. Caleb felt completely out of place in his work clothes, grease still under his fingernails despite washing his hands 3 times. But Professor Chen met him at the entrance with a warm smile and a reassurance. "Don't try to sound academic. That's not what my students need. They need real-world perspective from someone who solves actual problems." Professor Chen led him toward the classroom. "Just be yourself." The classroom was larger than Caleb expected, tiered seating rising toward the back, maybe 60 students scattered throughout. When he walked in with Professor Chen, conversations died. 60 pairs of eyes turned to examine him, assessing, judging. Caleb felt his stomach clench. "Class," Professor Chen said. "This is Caleb Warren. He's a mobility equipment specialist who's going to talk to you about practical problem solving in assistive technology. Some of you may have heard about his recent work with the Hale Foundation. Listen to what he has to say. It's important." Then Professor Chen sat down, leaving Caleb standing at the front of the room with 60 engineering students waiting for wisdom he wasn't sure he possessed. "I'm not an engineer," Caleb started. "I don't have a degree. I'm a mechanic who works on cars and motorcycles and sometimes wheelchairs. So if you're expecting a technical lecture on biomechanics or materials science, you're in the wrong room." A few students shifted uncomfortably. One started packing up his bag, but Caleb pressed on. "What I can tell you is this. A week ago, I rebuilt a wheelchair that had been designed by specialists with advanced degrees, built by engineers with years of experience, and tested by physical therapists with all the right credentials. And it hurt. Every single day, it hurt the girl using it. Not because those people weren't smart or skilled or well-intentioned, but because they forgot the most important part of engineering. Which is," a student called out, "the human using it." Caleb pulled out his phone and brought up the photo Victor had sent. Maya at the coffee shop, laughing with friends. "This is Maya Hale, 17 years old, brilliant kid who wants to study biomedical engineering. For 6 months, she sat in a custom wheelchair that cost more than most cars. And for 6 months, she was in pain because that chair was designed for perfect posture, according to models, not for her actual body." He walked them through what he'd done. Not the technical details of how he'd modified the supports or adjusted the angles, but the why. Why he'd listened to Maya instead of trusting the specs. Why he'd measured her natural movement instead of relying on standard calculations. Why he'd prioritized her comfort over theoretical optimization. "The specialists weren't wrong," Caleb said. "Their engineering was sound. Their calculations were correct. But they'd optimized for an ideal that didn't exist instead of the reality sitting in front of them. And that's the trap I see in a lot of assistive technology. We build for average bodies, average needs, average use cases. But humans aren't average. We're all different. And the equipment should adapt to us, not force us to adapt to it." A hand went up in the middle of the room. A young woman with glasses and a skeptical expression. "But customization doesn't scale. You can't build individualized solutions for every person who needs a wheelchair or a walker or a prosthetic. The cost would be prohibitive." "You're right. Full customization for every person isn't practical." Caleb smiled. "But what if we designed equipment to be easily modifiable? Modular components, adjustable systems, equipment that a local mechanic or therapist could adapt based on the specific user's needs. Build the flexibility in from the start instead of trying to create one-size-fits-all solutions." "That would require completely rethinking manufacturing standards," another student objected. "Yes, it would. And that's uncomfortable. Change always is." Caleb looked around the room. "But how many of you got into engineering because you wanted to help people, to solve real problems?" Almost every hand went up. Then remember that. When you're designing assistive equipment, when you're calculating weight distributions and material stresses and ergonomic specifications, remember that there's a real person on the other end of your design, someone who's trusting you to see them, not just as a set of measurements, but as a human being with the life they're trying to live. The skeptical student raised her hand again. "Can you show us? The actual modifications you made?" Caleb spent the next 45 minutes going through his documentation. Photos of Maya's wheelchair before and after. His sketches showing the changed angles and repositioned supports, the materials he'd chosen and why. Then he showed them Marcus's walker, explaining how he'd designed for a specific 10-year-old rather than a generic pediatric patient. He showed them Patricia's rebuilt wheelchair, demonstrating how 20-year-old equipment could be transformed with careful reinforcement and proper cushioning. The students asked questions, smart questions, challenging questions, questions about materials and stress points and long-term durability. And Caleb answered them honestly, admitting when he didn't know something, explaining his reasoning when he did. It was the most intellectually demanding conversation he'd had in years, and it was exhilarating. After the class ended, students clustered around him. Some wanted to know about internships at the foundation. Others wanted to share their own experiences with family members using assistive equipment. One student, a young man who used a wheelchair himself, thanked Caleb for articulating something he'd felt but couldn't express. "I've been in this chair since I was 12, the student said. "I've had 4 different chairs, each one supposedly better than the last, and each one had something that didn't quite work right. But when I tried to explain what was wrong, the specialist would tell me I just needed to adjust. Like my body was the problem, not the equipment." "Your body's not the problem," Caleb said firmly. "It's never the problem." "I know that now, but I wish someone had told me that 10 years ago. I wish the people designing my chairs had cared more about whether they worked for me and less about whether they met their design specifications. Then when you graduate, you be that person. Design equipment that adapts to people instead of forcing people to adapt to equipment. Be the engineer you needed when you were 12. The student's eyes lit up. "I will. I promise I will." Professor Chen walked Caleb back to his truck afterward, chatting about the class response and already planning to invite him back. But what stuck with Caleb wasn't the professional recognition or the possibility of future lectures. It was that student's promise, that somewhere down the line, because of this conversation, there might be an engineer who designed better equipment, who listened to users instead of just trusting specs, who prioritized humans over metrics. That was how change happened, not in grand gestures, but in small moments of connection, in one person inspiring another to think differently, in questioning assumptions and daring to prioritize people over protocols. The drive back to the garage took longer than expected. Traffic was heavy, and Caleb used the time to return phone calls. Dr. Chen wanted to refer 3 more patients. Jennifer Hale wanted to schedule a monthly consultation to review foundation projects. A reporter from the local paper wanted to do a story about his work. The requests kept coming, opportunity layering on opportunity, and Caleb felt the familiar anxiety rising. What if he couldn't handle all of this? What if he failed? What if... His phone rang, interrupting the spiral of worry. Victor hailed. "Caleb, where are you?" "Heading back to the garage. Why?" "Can you stop by my house? There's someone I want you to meet." "Victor, I'm exhausted. Can it wait until..." "Please, it's important. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't." 20 minutes later, Caleb pulled up to the mansion on Riverside Drive for the 3rd time that week. The gates opened automatically now. Victor had added his truck to the system. As he walked to the front door, he wondered what was so urgent that it couldn't wait. Victor met him at the entrance, and standing next to him was Maya. But they weren't alone. A woman stood with them, mid-40s, elegant, with Maya's dark hair and sharp eyes. She looked vaguely familiar, though Caleb couldn't place her. "Caleb, this is Dr. Rachel Morrison," Victor said. "She's the head of the National Institute for Assistive Technology Research." Doctor Morrison extended her hand. "Mr. Warren, I've heard remarkable things about your work. I wanted to meet you in person." "I don't understand," Caleb said, shaking her hand automatically. "I review grant applications for federal funding of assistive technology research," Dr. Morrison explained. "Victor and Jennifer have submitted a proposal for a comprehensive study on adaptive equipment modification, using your methodology as the foundation. If approved, it would be a 3-year, multi-million-dollar research project examining how individualized modifications improve quality of life for equipment users." Caleb felt the ground shift under his feet. "Multi-million-dollar? For my methodology?" "For evidence-based research into what you've been doing intuitively, documenting outcomes, creating protocols that can be taught to therapists and technicians nationwide, essentially scaling your approach without losing the individualization that makes it effective." Dr. Morrison smiled. "The preliminary proposal is compelling, but I wanted to meet you before making my recommendation. Wanted to understand your vision for this work." "I don't have a vision. I just help people." "That's exactly the vision we need." Dr. Morrison gestured to the seating area. "Can we talk?" They talked for 2 hours. Dr. Morrison asked questions about Caleb's process, his decision-making, his approach to problem-solving. She wanted to know how he'd learned what worked, how he assessed user needs, how he balanced individual customization with practical constraints. And Caleb answered as honestly as he could, trying to articulate things he'd never had to explain before. "The key," he kept coming back to, "is listening. Not just to what people say, but to what their bodies tell you, how they move, where they compensate, what hurts and what helps. Equipment should serve the person, not the other way around. And you believe this approach can be taught? That it's not just an intuitive skill you personally possess? I'm teaching my 7-year-old son. I'm consulting with foundation engineers. I just lectured to 60 university students. If I can explain it to them, it can be taught. Caleb paused. But you have to care more about the outcome than about being right. That's the part I'm not sure can be taught. The willingness to throw out your assumptions and start over if the person using the equipment is still struggling. Dr. Morrison took notes throughout, occasionally asking for clarification, nodding thoughtfully. When she finally set down her pen, she looked at Caleb with an expression he couldn't quite read. Mr. Warren, if this grant is approved, and I'm strongly inclined to recommend approval, it will change the landscape of assistive technology in this country. Your work will become the subject of academic study. Your methods will be analyzed, documented, and distributed to professionals nationwide. You'll become a public figure in this field, whether you want to or not. She leaned forward. Are you prepared for that? Was he? A week ago, Caleb had been a struggling mechanic barely keeping his business alive. Now he was being told his approach to wheelchair modification could reshape an entire industry. It was overwhelming, terrifying, impossible. But then he thought about Maya, comfortable and thriving, about Patricia, moving through her home without pain, about Marcus, grinning as he maneuvered his blue walker, about the 17 other people waiting for his help, about all the people he hadn't met yet who were struggling with equipment that didn't work, who were being told to just adapt, who needed someone to actually listen. I don't know if I'm prepared, Caleb said honestly. But I know it needs to happen, so yeah, I'm in. Whatever it takes. Dr. Morrison smiled. That's what I hoped you'd say. I'll make my recommendation next week. Expect to hear about approval within the month. She stood, offering her hand again. Welcome to the world of assistive technology research, Mr. Warren. Try not to let it change who you are. That's what makes you valuable. After Dr. Morrison left, Caleb sat with Victor and Maya in the elegant living room, trying to process what had just happened. A federal research grant. His methodology becoming the subject of academic study. Everything he'd been doing instinctively being formalized, documented, taught to professionals across the country. This is insane, Caleb said finally. This is necessary, Victor corrected. The assistive technology industry has been stagnant for decades. Insurance companies dictate what equipment people receive. Manufacturers prioritize cost over quality. Users are told to adapt instead of having equipment that adapts to them. Someone needed to disrupt the system. Turns out that someone is you. I'm just a mechanic. Stop saying that. Maya's voice was sharp. You're not just anything. You're the person who changed my life, who gave Marcus his independence, who's teaching engineers to think differently. Own it, Caleb. You've earned it. She's right, Victor added. And more than that, people are counting on you. Every person with inadequate equipment who's struggling right now, they need you to succeed. To prove that there's a better way. To create enough disruption that the industry has to change. Caleb thought about the weight of that responsibility. All those people he'd never meet, depending on him to get this right. To not let success or recognition or federal grants change the fundamental approach. Listening, caring, prioritizing people over protocols. I need to get home, Caleb said, standing up. Ethan's with Mrs. Chen, and I promised him I'd be back for dinner. Of course. Victor walked him to the door. Caleb, thank you. For everything. For Maya, obviously. But also for reminding me what actually matters. I'd gotten lost in metrics and fundraising and foundation politics. You brought me back to the reason I started all this. To help people. You were already helping people. You just needed a reminder to listen to them. Well, consider this my ongoing commitment to listening, to building with people instead of for them, to trusting that the person using the equipment knows more about what works than any specification sheet. Victor smiled. You're a good teacher. I'm learning as I go. Aren't we all? Caleb drove home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The city looked different somehow, more welcoming, less overwhelming. Or maybe he was different. Maybe struggle and survival had transformed into something that felt suspiciously like hope. When he pulled up to his garage, the sign now complete, announcing Warren's auto and mobility repair to the world. Mrs. Chen was standing outside with Ethan. His son spotted the truck and came running. Dad, Mrs. Chen helped me make dinner. Well, she made dinner and I helped, but I stirred the sauce and everything. Caleb scooped Ethan into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of his son, soap and kid sweat and unconditional love. That sounds perfect, buddy. I'm starving. Mrs. Chen smiled at them both. You had a good day? I had an impossible day that somehow worked out. Caleb set Ethan down. Thank you for watching him. Always a pleasure. He's a good boy. Makes me miss when my children were young. She patted Caleb's arm. You're doing good work. I hear people talking. The neighborhood is proud of you. After Mrs. Chen left, Caleb and Ethan ate dinner together in their small apartment. Spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, salad from a bag. Simple food, normal food. The kind of meal Caleb had been making for years. But tonight it tasted better. Tonight everything felt different. Dad? Ethan said through a mouthful of pasta. Are we really going to be okay now? Like, not just okay for a while, but actually okay? Caleb looked at his son. Healthy now, the medicine working, the worry lines that had been too prominent on a 7-year-old's face finally smoothing out. He thought about the foundation work, the consulting fees, the federal grant that might be coming. About the rent paid in full, the equipment debt cleared, the future that looked less like drowning and more like building. Yeah, buddy, I think we're really going to be okay. Because you helped Maya. Because I stopped being afraid to try. And because when I needed help, I let people help me. Caleb reached across the table and took his son's hand. That's the real lesson, Ethan. Not that I'm some great mechanic or that I fixed a wheelchair, but that I learned to accept help when I needed it. To trust that good people exist and sometimes they want to support you, not control you. Like Mr. Hale? Like Mr. Hale, like Jennifer, like Dr. Chen, like Mrs. Chen next door, like all the people who saw us struggling and reached out instead of judging. Caleb squeezed Ethan's hand. And like you, who kept being brave even when you were scared, who never complained even when things were hard. You taught me how to be strong, buddy. Did you know that? Ethan's eyes went wide. I did? You did. Every time I wanted to give up, I looked at you and remembered why I was fighting. You gave me a reason to keep trying. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Afterward, Ethan did his homework at the kitchen table while Caleb washed dishes, and the ordinariness of it all felt precious. This was what he'd been fighting for, not grand success or professional recognition, but moments like this. Normal evenings, his son healthy and safe and doing math homework. The simple piece of a life that wasn't falling apart. Later, after Ethan fell asleep, Caleb stood at the window looking out over the neighborhood. Modest houses, working people, families doing their best. This was his world. Not mansion gates and foundation headquarters and federal research grants. This was where he belonged. But maybe, just maybe, he could exist in both worlds. Could be the mechanic who helped his neighbors and the consultant who changed industry standards. Could raise his son in a studio apartment while also teaching engineers at the university. Could stay grounded here while reaching higher than he'd ever imagined possible. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Just got accepted to State University's biomedical engineering program. Early admission. They said my essay about learning from a mechanic who cared more about people than credentials was the most compelling thing they'd read in years. Thank you for inspiring me. Caleb stared at the text, his throat tight. This girl he'd helped, she was going to become an engineer, was going to design equipment that worked for people, was going to carry forward the lesson he'd taught her about listening and caring and prioritizing humans over specifications. That was legacy. Not money or awards or recognition, but the impact he had on others. The ripples spreading out from one impossible promise kept. He texted back, I didn't inspire you, I just listened to you. You inspired yourself by knowing what you needed and demanding better. Never forget that. You're going to change lives. The response came quickly. We both are. Together. Together. That was the key, wasn't it? Not going it alone. Not being the hero who saved everyone through individual brilliance, but working together with Victor, with Jennifer, with engineers and doctors and therapists and users. building a network of people who cared about getting it right more than about being right. That was how systems changed, not through individual genius, but through collective commitment, through enough people deciding that the old way wasn't good enough and being willing to do the hard work of creating something better. Caleb looked around his small apartment one more time. Tomorrow, he'd meet with Jennifer about the next round of foundation cases. He'd finished documenting Marcus's walker for the research database. He'd return calls from 3 more doctors with patients needing help. He'd continue building a body of work that proved caring mattered as much as credentials. But tonight, he was just a father in a studio apartment, grateful for clean dishes and paid rent and a healthy son sleeping in the next room. Grateful for the chance to help people. Grateful for the reminder that he was enough. The broken sign, the old Warren's Auto Repair with its missing R, sat in the corner where Ethan had insisted on keeping it. A reminder of where they'd started, of how far they'd come, of the fact that being broken didn't mean being finished. Sometimes being broken was just the first step toward being rebuilt into something stronger. Caleb turned off the light and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new people counting on him to listen and care and help. Tomorrow he'd continue becoming the person he hadn't known he could be. But tonight, in the darkness of his small apartment, Caleb Warren allowed himself to feel something he'd almost forgotten existed. Peace. Not the peace of having arrived, but the peace of finally moving in the right direction, of knowing his struggles had meaning, of understanding that survival was just the foundation. The real work was building something that mattered on top of it. He'd kept his impossible promise to Maya, and in doing so, he'd discovered that impossible was just another word for not yet done. Tomorrow, he'd keep building, keep helping, keep proving that mechanics could change the world, one wheelchair at a time. But tonight, he'd rest. Because even people who do impossible things need to sleep. And Caleb Warren, single father, struggling mechanic, unlikely catalyst for change, had earned his rest. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, he slept without fear. Because the future was no longer something to dread. It was something to build,